And attendees are entering the meeting, Mr. Chair. If we can give folks, it takes them a while to come in.
Sure.
Sorry, it's a YouTube video.
Karen, you let us know when you're ready on your end.
Sure. The numbers of attendees has stabilized, Mr. Chair. We have 45 attendees at this point. The meeting is live streaming on YouTube, and we're ready to start.
All right. Mr. Bridger, do you want to go over the governor's virtual meeting order?
Sure. We're still under the governor's executive order for virtual meetings, but there are some rules for how those meetings are conducted. One is that all materials need to be posted ahead of time online, which we have done prior to the meeting. The other, in terms of procedure, both the attendance needs to be done by roll call vote, and any agenda item that's voted on needs to be done by roll call vote. So every agenda item will require a roll call vote. Those are the basic parameters. With that, I will whenever you're ready, I'll ask for a roll call vote to start the meeting.
Please conduct a roll call.
Okay. I'll begin going in order. The commissioners is listed on our website. So commissioners present, if you would just affirm by saying yes that you're here. Blythe Bailey.
Here.
Councilman Ledford.
Here.
Thomas Palmer.
Here.
Mary Kay Hyatt.
Here.
Adam Verone.
Here.
Jason Farmer.
Here.
Velma Wilson. She may be running a little late. Velma Wilson. Okay. Todd Lehman.
Here.
Commissioner Bankston.
Here.
Y.L. Coker. He may be running late. Y.L. Coker. Okay. David Matthews.
Here.
Chris Mabey.
Here.
Jimmy Parks. I know he was having some technical difficulty. He may be logging in a few minutes later if we start. Okay. Barry Payne. Barry Payne. Okay. And Karen, is he showing up as registered in, but maybe his mic's not turned on?
I'm checking him now, and I will, if you want to swing back to him at the end, I will see if I can bring him in.
Okay, that's the last vote.
Hey, Karen.
Yes.
Did John couldn't hear me?
Okay, I
Okay.
can hear you now.
Okay.
Thank
Jimmy
you.
Parks is here. Okay,
Yeah.
so that's enough for our quorum anyway. I know folks will be, and maybe Karen, you can just announce when other commissioners join us for the record. Is that okay?
Yeah.
So, Chair, we do have enough people present to conduct our meeting today.
All right. Thank you, John. Karen, do you want to go over some highlights of today's meeting in light of the fact that it's the first planning commission meeting we've had via Zoom?
Sure. Most of what I have to share with the attendees, I put in the chat box, Mr. Chair. Emily and Joe and I will be managing the chat box. I think John has maybe some additional comments.
Sure. So just as a reminder for folks in the room to be monitoring, if you're on Zoom, to monitor the chat box, Karen Rennick will be giving you some instructions. You should see on the screen already a list of people who have signed up to speak for cases. It is a little complicated in terms of how we get folks registered. So we ask that folks, if you want to speak to today's meeting, you need, if you're not already on that list you see on the screen, you need to go into the chat feature on Zoom and let staff know what case you would like to speak on so they can register. Please note that, again, we have a lengthy agenda. We have 2 months of cases that we're trying to run through. And so we will be closing registrations to speak at 1:20. Again, 1:20. So if you're not already registered, you need to go ahead and do so through the chat box, because at 1:20 we'll be closing that so that we can proceed with the meeting. And then those folks who are registered will be able to give the opportunity to speak as their case comes forward. So I'll leave it at that.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Bridger. Anything else from staff before I jump into opening remarks? Okay. All right. Well, for those of you who are attending for the first time a planning commission meeting via Zoom, thank you for attending. I will be chairing today's meeting of the Hamilton County Regional Planning Commission, and just want to remind everybody of the way this meeting will run. So Planning Commission has received this packet in the mail a little less than, maybe a little more than a week ago, and has had the opportunity to review it. And like with any other Planning Commission meeting, there will be cases where we do not have opposition present. And in those cases, we will rule on those cases without necessarily hearing the staff recommendation. So what I'll do is I'll go through the agenda and I will ask staff if there's any opposition present or anybody that wishes to speak. If there is somebody that wants to speak, the total time allotted for the opposition is 9 minutes. And then the applicant will have 7 minutes to present, and then 2 minutes after. So just, sorry, it's been what, 60 days since I chaired a planning commission meeting, so I apologize. So I'll ask if there's any opposition present. Staff will tell me if there is or isn't. We'll hear the staff report. The applicant will have 7 minutes to present the case. We'll have 9 minutes for opposition. The applicant will have 2 minutes to rebut. Now, I will say that when we have a live planning commission meeting, from time to time, there's a lot of people that want to speak in opposition. And that 9 minutes is pretty hard and fast. It's very, very seldom that I will grant more time than that 9 minutes. And so Karen, if she tells me that there are more than just a couple people that want to speak in opposition, I'll ask her how many people. Hopefully she'll know. She'll tell me, and I will make sure to stop people and interrupt them so that everybody who wants to speak will speak. And I just apologize in advance because I think it's the least favorite part of what I have to do, which is stop somebody and remind them that there's other people that want to speak, especially in this virtual world that we're in. It's more often the case that we would have a long line of people down the left side of the room or the right side of the room, and we would see all those people. In this case, you may not be able to see them, but Karen's going to tell me that they're out there, and we'll make sure that they've had an opportunity to speak. So with that, we'll jump into the agenda. Mr. Bridger.
Yeah, I would say just one note. Looks like I'm following the chat. Just, I know we're waiting folks a chance to register. Looks like case 2020-22, there's somebody wanting to speak, just know on a subdivision plat request. So normally we do the subdivision plats at the beginning of the agenda. So let me get Karen Rennick online. Karen, is there anybody else that, before we get into the subdivision plats, based on the chat links I'm seeing, that we need to hold off on before they're ready?
I see the 2022 one from John West from AD Engineering, and I'm making a note.
Okay.
Mr. West is the applicant.
He's the applicant, though. I think there's no opposition that I see of as for subdivision cases other than the ones that we have listed.
Okay. So we're good to go. I'm just double checking based on the chat. We can go ahead and proceed with the subdivisions anyway at this point.
Okay. All right. The first case on the agenda, and Mr. Bridger, correct me if I'm wrong, we're gonna rule on each one of these independently, right?
That's correct.
Okay. So in every other way, this meeting is going to go just like any one of our other meetings, right?
Yes.
Okay. All right. First case on the agenda is SD 2020-0024, and this is a variance request for lot frontage on a dedicated public street. A staff recommendation to approve, and is located at the 2400 block of Gun Barrel Road. Karen, is there any opposition present?
Yes, sir. We have 2 people that would like to speak in opposition.
Okay. And I'm assuming the applicant is present?
The applicant is present, and I just allowed Mike Price to be able to speak.
Okay. So we'll hear from staff first, and we'll hear from Mike, and then our opposition.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is a subdivision variance request to actually zoning section 3864 requires frontage on dedicated public street of individual units when the underlying property is to be sold, and to sections 403A and 403-2B of the Chattanooga subdivision regulations. Those sections require that all lots front a publicly maintained road. This is a request to allow a private drive to satisfy the lot frontage requirements. Here's the subdivision plat. It basically fronts two streets, Gun Barrel Road and Mintom Drive. Access to the subdivision will be off Mintom Drive to the north of the screen. This road basically serves as the lot frontage for those lots. It's an internal street development, which has been approved by CDOT and all the people involved in the review as a private street. The street does not serve a common public interest outside the deeds of the residents living in the development. Approving the variance would not be detrimental to the public interest, as this street design has been approved by CDOT. The only difference in this case is public versus private ownership. So staff recommends to approve. The road meets the standards of any public road. Again, the only difference is private ownership versus public ownership. I do believe this road will be gated as well. So that's the request. Staff recommends to approve.
Thank you, Mr. Schultz. Are there any questions from the Planning Commission members before we hear from the applicant?
I have some questions, Mr. Chair.
Councilman Ledford.
Thank you, sir. This is in my district, very familiar with this project. Brian, the request for tell me the purpose of this request again, and can you explain to me if it's private or public? If it's private, that means the city of Chattanooga does not have responsibility for maintaining the lot, nor responsibility for fixing it or any kind of structures that are on that. Is that right?
That is correct. It's a public road to be maintained by the residents of this subdivision.
Okay, and this is internal.
It's internal,
Okay.
connecting to Mintom.
Okay.
It's my understanding that because this doesn't serve a more common development pattern or use, CDOT had questions about whether this should be public or private. So CDOT had some hesitation about this being a public road, and we've all agreed that private makes sense in this general location. The only difference is who maintains it.
Okay, a little interested in hearing the opposition because I have not been made aware of anything. So I'll move forward. Thank you, sir.
Okay.
Mr. Price. Hey, Karen, I'm assuming you allow Mr. Price to talk. Is that right?
I have unmuted Mr. Price. He might need to unmute on his end, or if he can type in the chat box if he's having problems.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. So Mike Price, MAP Engineers, and the request is exactly what Brian has stated, which is to allow internal access versus external. If some of the Planning Commission members remember, the case actually in rezoning this property came before the commission probably 4 to 6 months ago, where we amended the zoning conditions. And so this is the final result of that action in terms of what the layout looks like and how it becomes platted, which is through this variance process. We are widening Mintom Drive as part of that staff review going through the approval process. There is one entrance into the development only, that being that shaded portion that you see off Mintom, and then working in a internal rectangle that you see there with a couple of little wings kicking off that makes certain each lot has access to it. So with that, I'll defer the rest of my time if needed to whatever concerns oppositions are raising, so I can understand what those concerns might be and maybe how to address.
All right, thank you, Mr. Price. Are there any questions for the applicant before we hear from opposition? All right.
Mr. Chair,
Councilman Ledford.
may I ask a question to Mr. Price, if I could?
Sure.
Mr. Price, the this request, is this based on any conditions that we placed at city council as a result of?
This adheres to all the conditions that were placed at city council. Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chairman.
All right, with that, Karen, one question I have that we haven't figured out yet is, normally we have a clock that John and I are looking at to limit the amount of time that either the applicant or the opposition has to speak. Where is that clock, or do I need to keep that? I don't.
Brian does. He just, I think Brian, you want to comment on that?
I just shared it on your screen now. It should have a clock on there. I don't know if y'all can see that.
Okay, that's great.
Let me go back to it.
Plan B will be my cell phone.
Okay, well, I was jotting down the time in our previous meetings, but that'll be more helpful. Okay, Karen.
Mr. Chair, we have two applicants who would like, or excuse me, two folks who would like to speak in opposition. Mr. Leonard Cross and Stanley Thurman. I have unmuted Stanley Thurman so he can speak. I've not yet seen Mr. Cross's name pop up as an attendee. So Mr. Cross, if you are on the call, if you could raise your virtual hand on Zoom, I'll know to unmute you, but otherwise, Mr. Thurman, you're unmuted on my end and you might have to unmute your phone in order to speak.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, my question is where that entranceway is going to be located across from Hamilton Cove, which is the cul-de-sac I live on, coming off of Gun Barrel, coming down Minton, there's a drop there. And oftentimes we have to stop to make sure it's not a car at the bottom of the hill. With that road being located going into the new subdivision, is that going to create, has traffic engineering looked at that to see if that's going to pose a site problem?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Thurman. I think that's a question that we can hear from Mike Price on.
Do you want me to answer now, or was the other opposition wanting to speak as well?
And I have one other question while I have you, and I'll be through. Is Minton going to be widened all the way from Gun Barrel all the way down?
Okay. Anything else?
No, that should have it.
Okay, thank you. Karen, were we able to?
Mr. Chair, I do not see Mr. Cross in the attendee list, and I don't see that he has raised his hand.
All right, thank you. Mr. Price, you were able to hear those questions, I'm assuming?
Yes, sir.
All right.
So I'm going to answer the second question first, and that is yes, Minton Road will be widened across the entire frontage of this development. And as it relates to the entrance location, we did try to locate it at a point that made sense from a site visibility standpoint. So we do believe that the location is one that makes sense and would provide proper safety. And it has been reviewed by CDOT, and we fully expect them to approve it based upon the preliminary plats that have already been submitted.
All right, thank you, Mr. Price. Are there any questions for the applicant from Planning Commission members?
Mr. Chairman, may I chime in?
Councilman Ledford.
This might be an added benefit to the question. That is, part of this project is in conjunction with something I've been working on for a while now, and that is also the repaving of the rest of Minton Road in the in this recent budget that we passed, last year's paving budget that is still on the book. So Minton Road is actually scheduled to be paved in conjunction with this project and the widening. So it's a pretty good solution for the area and the community.
Thank you, Councilman Ledford. With that,
Move to approve.
I'll second that.
so we've got a motion to approve, and it has been properly seconded. Any discussion? All
Okay,
right,
I'll do a roll call.
we'll do a roll call vote.
Blythe Bailey. Blythe Bailey.
Yes.
Councilman Ledford.
Yes.
Thomas Palmer.
Yes.
Mary Kay Hyatt.
Yes.
Adam Varone.
Yes.
Jason Farmer.
Yes.
Velma Wilson. Todd Lehman.
Yes.
Commissioner Bankston.
Yes.
Lyle Coker. David Matthews.
Yes.
Chris Mabey.
Yes.
Jimmy Parks.
Yes.
Barry Payne. Okay, it does pass with affirmative vote. There are a couple of folks, no votes, but yes, it passes.
Mr. Chairman, we have a plat also associated with this, which is case 2020-25. While the opposition is still here, can we go ahead and act on that case as well? It's a preliminary plat. Staff recommends to approve.
All right, so,
I'll move to approve.
all right, we've got a motion to approve,
Second.
and it has been properly seconded.
And that is with conditions.
That
Just for the
motion
record,
Yes.
with
I had
conditions.
I had a motion from Ledford and a second by Matthews.
That's
Yes.
correct.
Okay.
Any discussion? All in favor? John?
Okay, yeah, and I'm going to just do last names so we can go a little quicker. Bailey,
Yes.
Ledford,
Yes.
Palmer,
Yes.
Hyatt,
Yes.
Barone,
Yes.
Farmer,
Yes.
Wilson, Lehman,
Yes.
Bankston,
Yes.
Coker, Matthews,
Yes.
Maybe,
Yes.
Parks,
Yes.
Payne. Okay, motion passes.
Mr. Chair, can we take a moment to test Mr. Coker's video, or excuse me, his audio? Mr. Coker, you are part of the participant meeting. I've unmuted you. Can you just verbally confirm you can hear us? And you might need to unmute your mic. Okay, I think Mr. Coker is on. We'll give him a few minutes, but John, just maybe double check on the roll call next time. Give him
Sure.
an extra minute. Thank you.
I will do that.
Okay, before we move on, I just wanted to point out that there are several people that are not muted. And from time to time, we do get feedback through those lines. And it is possible to, if you'll go to the lower bottom left-hand corner, you can mute and then set it up to where when you hold the space bar, it unmutes it and you can talk. And then when you release the space bar, it goes back on mute. Just thought that might be helpful. With that, we'll move on to case SD 2020-0022. This is Brainbridge subdivision, lots 1 through 90. It's
I
located
think we have 2-1.
1.
I started the first one.
Sorry. Hey,
I was thinking 145 or so before we would get.
got it. Okay, so we're on case 2020-0021.
That is correct.
We're probably leaving.
This is Hamilton on Hunter subdivision, phase 17B, lots
They're here.
1527 through 1594, located at the 6400 block of Hunter Road. This has a staff recommendation to approve with conditions. Is there any opposition present, Karen?
We have no opposition for this.
Move to approve with conditions.
Second.
We have a motion to approve with conditions, and it has been properly seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, please indicate by saying aye on roll call.
Bailey,
Aye.
Ledford,
Yes.
Palmer,
Aye.
Hyatt,
Aye.
Barone,
Yes.
Farmer,
Aye.
Wilson, Lehman,
Yes.
Bankston,
Aye.
Coker. Mr. Coker, can you hear us? Okay, Matthews,
Aye.
Maybe,
Yes.
Parks,
Aye.
Payne. Motion passes. Mr. Collier, who was the motion seconder on that? I was trying to.
I did one. I'm not sure if anyone else did.
I thought it was Farmer,
The Farmer did the motion and the second by
or
Matthews.
the second Farmer, I thought.
Okay.
You can't
Sorry, guys.
communicate right now. It's audio. So it's audio not working.
Can we somehow get Mike Price off the line?
Hey,
I'm
I
sorry,
texted him, Ethan, to mute his mic.
Okay.
That's why I was distracted. I'll say I recognize the voice.
All right,
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Maybe.
thank you. Just a quick question and I guess clarification. I know our past planning commission meeting was postponed, and just kind of wanted to get a feel for where these cases, the status of some of them are. Have any of these gone to council yet or to county commission, or is this the first time they've been heard?
This is the first time they've been heard. The ones that were deferred from the April PC meeting are the first ones we're looking at as part of Mesa. None of these have been heard at the local legislative body yet.
Correct.
Thank you.
All right, next case on the agenda is SD 2020-0022. This is Greenbridge subdivision lots 1 through 90, located at the 7300 block of Ooltewah Georgetown Road, and has a staff recommendation to approve with conditions. Karen, is there any opposition present?
There is no opposition, and we do have someone who is here to speak if you want to hear that.
You're referring to the applicant?
The applicant, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Move to approve with conditions.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion from Jason Farmer and a second from Councilman Ledford. So we do have a motion to approve, and it has been properly seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Okay, I'll start. Bailey,
Aye.
Ledford,
Yes.
Palmer,
Aye.
Hyatt,
Yes.
Barone,
Yes.
Farmer,
Yes.
Wilson, Lehman,
Aye.
Bankston,
Aye.
Coker, Matthews,
Aye.
Maybe,
Yes.
Parks,
Aye.
Payne. Motion passes.
All right, next case on the agenda is SD 2020-0023, and this is located on Fuller Road. It's 9427 Fuller Road, and this has a staff recommendation to approve with conditions. Is there any opposition present?
No opposition.
Move to approve.
Second.
We have a motion to approve from Mr. Matthews and a second from Councilman Ledford. Is there any discussion? All in favor, indicate by saying aye.
Bailey, Ledford,
Yes.
Palmer,
Aye.
Hyatt,
Yes.
Barone,
Yes.
Farmer,
Yes.
Wilson, Lehman,
Yes.
Bankston,
Yes.
Coker, Matthews,
Yes.
Maybe,
Aye.
Parks,
Aye.
Payne. Okay, motion carries.
Thank you, Mr. Bridger. Next case on the agenda is SD 2020-0025.
I think we just voted on that one as part of the first part of the agenda. Sorry about that, Chairman. That was the one that we did right after the variance. Yeah.
Item under old business was deferred from February, and this is case 2020-0027, and it's my understanding that this applicant has requested a 60-day deferral. Is there any opposition present, Karen?
We do have one person in opposition. And I'm making sure, if you give me 1 second, I'll make sure that they're on the call.
Okay, and do we have the applicant present?
I do not see the applicant is on the call. If the applicant, Guy Chirwanik, is on the call, if you could please raise your hand in Zoom, so we know to bring you in. And I'm looking for the opposition while we're here too.
All right, so this case is for rezone from R1 residential zone and RTZ residential townhome 0 lot line zone to RTZ residential townhouse 0 lot line zone and C2 convenience commercial zone.
And Mr. Chair, there is someone here in opposition in the attendee list.
Okay.
Karen, were you able to find the applicant?
If the applicant, no, I have I have 2 people here in opposition that have raised their hand. I have a Craig and Robin Serene, but I don't see that I have the applicant here.
Mr. Chairman,
Councilman Ledford.
totally your discretion, sir, but I do plan to make a motion for a 60-day deferral to July 13th, as there are several issues and moving parts on this project that may be addressed. I just wanted to let the opposition know that that was my intent.
All right.
Mr. Chair, it appears that the applicant, we do have someone that raised their hand. I don't know if that's the applicant or not. Just additional information.
Okay. And Mr. Bridger, how did the applicant ask for the 60-day deferral? I mean, how did we find out about that?
They sent us an email.
Okay. Well, in light of the fact that this is our agenda and we have quite a bit of work still to do today, and the applicant has requested a 60-day deferral, what is the will of the commission? Do we want to hear from the opposition or staff, or make a motion to defer?
I would like to make respectfully a motion to defer 60 days to July 13th.
Second.
We have a motion to defer. It has been properly seconded. That was Councilman Ledford and
I think Matthews.
Yes.
Mr. Matthews. Any discussion? All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Okay. Bailey.
Aye.
Ledford.
Yes.
Palmer.
Yes.
Hyatt.
Yes.
Barone.
Yes.
Farmer.
Yes.
Wilson. Lehman.
Yes.
Bankston.
Yes.
Coker. Matthews.
Aye.
Baby.
Yes.
Parks.
Yes.
Payne. Okay, motion passes.
Thank you, Mr. Bridger. Next case on the agenda was deferred from March. And it's case 2020-0034. And this is located at 4247 Shalford Road. It's an application to rezone from R1 residential zone to C2 convenience commercial zone, and has a staff recommendation to approve with conditions. Is there any opposition present?
There is no opposition on the call.
Move to approve with condition.
We have a motion to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
Councilman Ledford with the motion and Mr. Matthews with the second.
Hey, Chairman, just considers conditions. I'm assuming the applicant doesn't have any questions about the conditions. I know they had a neighborhood meeting on this a week ago.
They did.
Good catch. Can you take Mike Price off mute? Mr.
Mike, you should be off mute. Can you speak?
Yes, ma'am. I have no problems with staff recommendations.
All right, we've got a motion to approve with conditions, and it has been properly seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Bailey.
Aye.
Ledford.
Yes.
Palmer.
Yes.
Palmer. Hyatt.
Yes.
Barone.
Yes.
Farmer.
Yes.
Wilson. Lehman,
Yes.
Bankston,
Yes.
Coker, Matthews,
Aye.
Maybe,
Aye.
Parks,
Aye.
Payne. Motion carries.
Thank you, Mr. Bridger.
Mhm.
First case under new business is mandatory referral. Case MR 2020-0041. This is located at the 2400 block of Suck Creek Road. And it is a right-of-way abandonment. It has a staff recommendation to approve. Is there any opposition present?
We do have one person who would like to speak in opposition.
And Karen, is the applicant present?
The applicant is present, and I will unmute Jim Franklin's line and allow him to speak. Mr. Franklin, you should be able to speak now. You might need to unmute the phone on your end.
Okay, before we hear from either the applicant or any opposition, I'd like to hear the staff report. Mr. Schultz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This again is a request to abandon an unopened right-of-way in the county along Suck Creek Road. It's in the 2400 block of Suck Creek Road. The purpose is to combine the properties. You can see on the screen the highlighted right-of-way in the red. The applicant owns property on either side of that right-of-way. Here's an aerial view of the site. You can see Suck Creek in the middle of the screen. To the north is vacant land. To the south, of course, the Tennessee River. To the east and west are single-family detached dwellings. And in the middle of the screen, highlighted in the yellow, is the unopened right-of-way that the applicant is requesting to be abandoned. Here's a view of the site looking from Suck Creek Road towards Tennessee River. The unopened right-of-way is somewhere in the middle of the picture here. It's currently zoned R2A, which is a rural residential district. Some of the questions we ask when reviewing these cases is demonstrate the public has no further need or interest to obtain the right-of-way. That has been addressed. There is no further need to obtain the right-of-way because it does not provide a future connection to another right-of-way as it dead ends in the Tennessee River. Does the right-of-way provide existing or potential service or access to adjacent properties? Again, the right-of-way dead ends in the Tennessee River and does not provide connectivity or road frontage to adjacent properties as they front Suck Creek Road. The closure will not landlock any property. That is true. All properties front Suck Creek Road, so it would not landlock any property. Then the abandonment of the right-of-way is necessary to achieve a significant private or public interest. Abandoning this right-of-way would allow the owner to combine the properties into one lot. So staff recommends to approve the requested abandonment of the right-of-way for Suck Creek Road.
Thank you, Mr. Schultz. Any questions for staff? All right, we'll hear from the applicant first and then the opposition. Mr. Franklin.
Mr. Franklin, you should be able to speak. You might need to unmute the mic on your end.
Hello?
Hello?
I'd like to speak.
Is this Mr. Franklin?
No, man, this is Mr. Roden.
Okay, you'll be up next. Hold on one second, please.
I'm what, up next?
Yes. I'm unmuting Mr. Franklin's mic again. And Mr. Chair, I'm just waiting for Mr. Franklin to, I guess, unmute and speak on his end. He's saying microphone is not working for Jim Franklin, and he should put that in the chat box.
Okay, so why don't we go ahead and hear from Mr. Roden, and then we'll see if maybe we can resolve the issue with Franklin before we rule on.
Okay. I'm muting Mr. Roden. Mr. Roden, you should be able to speak.
Great. Thank you so much. Can you hear me?
We can.
Great. Look, I would like to dispute this somehow because see, I own property right across the street. I got 3 lots across the street. And see, sir, I looked it up before and that those easements was meant for a Patriots Act, supposed to give us access to the river, which, you see, that land, those easements was not meant to be for the people on that side of the road. So those easements was meant for access across the street to get to to go to the river. And see, I own 3 lots across the street. See, please understand that you know, this is supposed to be my access to the river. Say, when there, you know, this has happened a long time ago. See, when nobody owned my property, but I bought my property, and I'd like to have my my right to the river. I'll say more if I need to, but you know, there's you know, like I said, sir, I own 2419, 2421, and 2417, which is across the street, and that's supposed to be my access to the river. See, that they have already got access to the river, and they don't need them little easements. See, it's just cutting, it's defacing my property. It's making my property worth less money if they get that access to the river. And I would love, I need to exercise my right to have these easements to going to the river. See,
Thank you.
I would appreciate so much if y'all could understand my point. There's a act called the Patriots Act that was passed in 1957 that says that the people across the street are supposed to have access to the Tennessee River right there in that area. See, that used to be the Trail of Tears up through there. And they gave my rights. They named it under a Patriots Act in 1957, and which allowed the other side of Suck Creek Road. See, it used to be a bunch of woods and nobody owned it. But see, sir, I bought it and paid for it in cash, and now I've got 3 lots, and I would highly recommend it. I mean, highly appreciate it if you could understand this, sir, that that is my, you know, my right to the Tennessee River. You see, that's my opening. It allows us, you know, access to the Tennessee River to be able to go over there and do fish
We
or
understand.
stuff like that.
Thank you, Mr. Roden. I really appreciate you taking the time to join us today and add that perspective. So thank you. Do we have the availability to hear from Jim Franklin yet, Karen?
Mr. Franklin, are you able to speak? He was chatting with us that he was not able to. I do not see on my end that there is any reason why I can't. Mr. Franklin, are you still, and I'm checking. He can't speak via the microphone. Would you like him to chat? He's able to chat his just general comment in the chat box, Mr. Chair, and we can read that in the record if you would like us to go that route.
Yeah, if he could, that would be great.
Okay. And Mr. Franklin, I don't know if you heard that, but if you could just share any information in the chat box, and I will read that out just so we have that as part of the recording.
Mr. Chair, while we're waiting on that, if you can see on the screen, the 3, just off to the right, top right, those are the properties that are owned by Mr. Roden.
Mr. Chair, I have a question for staff.
Councilman Ledford.
Hey, thank you, Chairman. Brian, do you know anything of the claim that was just made about past right-of-ways, and do we need to do some research into that?
I do not know anything about that Patriot Act. We also have looked into TVA. A lot of times TVA has easements along the waterway for, have to get building permits for docks and et cetera. There's also a limitation below the 690 elevation line for floodplain protection. But I'm not aware of any Patriot Act that requires these right-of-ways to be open to serve as access to the Tennessee River.
Okay, it's something I
I would add there's
might be
a
important to double or triple check on.
sure. There is a public boat ramp because I use that boat ramp quite frequently in my own little boating excursions.
Your
not far
John
from here.
boat.
Yes, my little John boat. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Matthews.
Yeah, I'm concerned about this. And I'm wondering if there could be some accommodations. I can understand the owner wishing to abandon that so he can combine some properties there. Perhaps though, there could be a remedy where we could move that easement or move that right of way to one side or the other so that it doesn't impact his objective. So I would like to move that we postpone this for at least 30 days to see if we can get the two together and see if we can accommodate both.
Mr. Chair, with this being a mandatory referral, the applicant would have to request a deferral. We cannot just automatically defer mandatory referrals. I think that's right, John. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Mr. Chair, we have, I did follow along with that, but we did get a chat from Mr. Franklin that says, I'm okay with moving the right of way to plan left so that I can still build my 1-bedroom house. And I don't know if he's been able to respond to Brian's comment about the applicant would be the one to have to request a deferral.
All right, we'll wait to hear back from.
Can we move to other items and let Mr. Franklin have an opportunity to email Brian Schultz with that official request?
Well, maybe he can text. He's been texting with or chatting with Karen. So if he's able, Mr. Franklin, what the motion that was made was to defer this case for 30 days. However, we are unable to defer this case for 30 days without you requesting that deferral. So Mr. Franklin, if there is an opportunity to move this to plan left, as you've described in this chat with Karen, and would be amenable to making a change like that, could you request the 30-day deferral? All right, there
you go.
We've got a request from the applicant to defer for 30 days.
I'll second the motion.
And we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
I'm sorry. I'm muted. Sorry, guys. Bailey.
Aye.
Ledford.
Yes.
Palmer.
Yes.
Hyatt.
Yes.
Barone.
Yes.
Farmer.
Yes.
Wilson. Lehman.
Yes.
Bankston.
Yes.
Coker. Matthews.
Yes.
Maybe.
Aye.
Parks.
Yes.
Payne. Motion carries.
Thank you, Mr. Bridger. Next case on the agenda is mandatory referral 2020-0042. This is 2700 and 2800 North Point Boulevard, and it's for a sewer abandonment and has a staff recommendation to approve. Is there any opposition present?
We have no one that's asked to speak.
Move to approve.
Second.
Second.
We have a motion to approve from Mr. Farmer and a second from Councilman Ledford. Any discussion? All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Bailey.
Aye.
Ledford.
Yes.
Palmer.
Yes.
Hyatt.
Yes.
Barone.
Yes.
Farmer.
Yes.
Wilson. Lehman.
Yes.
Bankston.
Yes.
Coker. Matthews,
Yes.
Maybe, Parks,
Yes.
Payne. Motion carries.
Thank you, Mr. Bridger. Next case on the agenda is mandatory referral 2020-0050. This is the 8,000 block of Volkswagen Drive and is for sewer easement abandonment. Is there any opposition present?
We don't have any opposition on the call.
Move to approve.
Second.
We have a motion to approve and it has been properly seconded. That motion was from who?
Matthews, I believe.
Yes, correct.
Who seconded?
Lehman seconded.
Okay, thank you. Any discussion? All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Bailey,
Yes.
Ledford,
Yes.
Palmer,
Yes.
Hyatt,
yes,
Barone,
Yes.
Farmer,
Yes.
Wilson, Lehman,
Yes.
Bankston,
Yes.
Coker, Matthews,
Yes.
Maybe,
Yes.
Parks,
Yes.
Payne. Motion carries.
Next case on the agenda is case 2020-0044. This is located at 2113 Crescent Club Drive and is an application to rezone from R1 residential zone to R2 residential zone. This has a staff recommendation to approve. Is there any opposition present?
There's no one that's asked to speak.
Move to approve.
Second.
We have a motion to approve and it has been properly seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Bailey,
Yes.
Ledford,
Yes.
Palmer,
Yes.
Hyatt,
yes,
Barone,
Yes.
Farmer,
Yes.
Wilson, Lehman,
Yes.
Bankston,
Yes.
Coker, Matthews,
Yes.
Maybe,
Yes.
Parks,
Yes.
Payne. Motion carries.
All right, thank you, Mr. Bridger. Next case on the agenda is case 2020-0046. This is located at 1416 William Street. This is an application to rezone from UCX4 to URA3 and has a staff recommendation to approve. Is there any opposition present?
There's no one is asked to speak.
Move to approve.
Second.
We have a motion to approve and it has been properly seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Bailey. Bailey,
Yes.
Ledford,
Yes.
Palmer,
Yes.
Hyatt,
yes,
Barone,
Yes.
Farmer,
Yes.
Wilson, Lehman,
Yes.
Bankston,
Yes.
Coker, Matthews,
Yes.
Maybe,
Yes.
Park,
Yes.
Payne. Motion carries.
All right, next case on the agenda is case 2020-0047. This is located at 7429 Iron Gate Drive. This is a permit for short-term vacation rental and has a staff recommendation to approve. Is there any opposition present?
No one's requested to speak, Mr. Chair.
What's the will of the commission?
Move to approve.
We have a-
Second.
We have a motion to approve. Was that, who made
Maybe.
the motion?
Maybe.
Who seconded it?
Farmer.
Thank you, Mr. Farmer. Any discussion? All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Bailey,
Yes.
Ledford,
Yes.
Palmer,
Yes.
Hyatt,
yes,
Barone,
Yes.
Farmer,
Yes.
Wilson, Lehman,
Yes.
Bankston,
Yes.
Coker, Matthews,
Yes.
Maybe,
Yes.
Parks,
Yes.
Payne. Motion passes.
Thank you, Mr. Bridger. Next case on the agenda is case 2020-0048. This is located at 2401 2527 Gun Barrel Road, and has a staff recommendation to approve. Is there any opposition present?
No one's requested to speak, Mr. Chair.
Move to approve.
We have a motion to approve from Councilman Ledford,
Second.
and that has been seconded from Mr. Farmer. Any discussion? All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Bailey,
Yes.
Ledford,
Yes.
Palmer,
Yes.
Hyatt,
yes,
Varone,
Yes.
Farmer,
Yes.
Wilson, Lehman,
Yes.
Bankston,
Yes.
Coker, Matthews, okay, maybe,
Yeah, yes,
and Parks.
Yes.
Yeah.
Motion passes.
Thank you, Mr. Bridger. Next case on the agenda is case 2020-0056. This is located at 5900 block of Union Springs Road, and this is an application to rezone from A1 to R2A. I'm sorry, A1 and R2A to A1, and this has a staff recommendation to approve. Is there any opposition present?
No one's requested to speak, Mr. Chair.
Move to approve.
Second.
We have a motion from Mr. Farmer, and it has been properly seconded from Councilman Ledford. Any discussion? All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Bailey,
Aye.
Ledford,
Yes.
Palmer,
Yes.
Hyatt,
yes,
Varone,
Yes.
Farmer,
Yes.
Wilson, Lehman,
Yes.
Bankston,
Yes.
Coker, Matthews,
yes,
maybe,
yes,
Parks,
Yes.
Payne. Motion passes.
Next case on the agenda is case 2020-0057, and this is located at 1810 East 13th Street. Is an application to rezone from R1 residential zone to R2 residential zone. This case has a staff recommendation to approve. Is there any opposition present?
No one is requested to speak, Mr. Chair.
move to approve.
Second.
We have a motion to approve from Mr. Matthews, and I believe Councilman Ledford seconded that.
Yes.
That's correct. Yep.
Any discussion? All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Bailey,
Yes.
Ledford,
Yes.
Palmer,
Yes.
Hyatt,
yes,
Varone,
Yes.
Farmer,
Yes.
Wilson, Lehman,
Yes.
Bankston,
Yes.
Coker, Matthews,
Yes,
maybe,
yes,
Parks,
Yes.
Payne. Motion carries.
Thank you, Mr. Bridger. Next case on the agenda is 2020-0063. This is located at 4905 Central Avenue, and it is an application to lift and amend conditions and has a staff recommendation to approve. Is there any opposition present?
Mr. Chair, we have 4 people that have requested to speak, and I will, when ready, unmute Andrew Wolders and Mike Price. I just want to give them a heads up that I'll be unmuting them, and when it's your turn, you'll be able to speak.
So, Karen,
Yes,
confirm that they actually want to speak in opposition? Because
yes, we have 4 people. There was, I think you were provided, I think at least 8, maybe 8 pieces of information on people who are in opposition, but I have registered to speak for this case: Vanessa Jackson, Bryant Hopkins, Sonia Lucas Brewer, and Calvin Williams.
Okay, thank you.
And I cannot confirm yet, they're all on the call.
Got it. Mr. Schultz, can you take us through this case?
Yes, Mr. Chair. This is to amend conditions 2, 3, and 5 of ordinance number 13187. The proposed use of this development is multifamily apartments. This is rezoned to R3 a couple years ago. The number of acres is 14.6 with the number of units 240 with a density of 16.3. This is located in Alton Park. You can see the right of the screen, Central Avenue. To the bottom is West 51st, and to the west or the left of the screen is Kirkland Avenue. This property is right across from the former Belsicol site at 4905 Central Avenue. This is a view of the site from Central Avenue. This is a view across the site from Central Avenue. This is the former Belsicol site. This is the view of some of the homes to the south of the site along West 51st Street. This is a view looking south on Kirkland Avenue. The site is to the right-hand side of the screen. Then this is a view at the end of Kirkland Avenue. This is the existing single-family dwelling looking west. Again, this is currently zoned R3 with conditions. Those conditions are on the screen. There were 6 conditions. Condition number 1 is project shall complete a transportation impact study approved by CDOT and comply with the noted aspects related to transportation access and circulation. Condition number 2, no parking shall be provided between any building and the public street. Condition number 3, buildings facing along a public street shall have a setback no more than 25 feet. Number 4, internal sidewalks shall be provided to connect from buildings to sidewalks on Central Avenue. Condition number 5, retain existing vegetation along the slope portion of the site bordering West 51st Street. And finally, condition number 6, no building taller than 3 stories. The conditions I've highlighted in the orange, which are 2, 3, and 5, are the conditions the applicant wishes to amend. So we'll go through these one at a time. Again, the existing condition is no parking shall be provided between any building and the public street. The proposed condition rewords this: no parking shall front Central Avenue, Kirkland Avenue, and West 51st Street. So the condition just clarifies what public streets we're talking about. The second condition to amend is buildings facing along a public street shall have a setback no more than the 25-foot minimum setback requirement. The proposed new condition would read: buildings fronting Central Avenue, Kirkland Avenue, and West 51st Street shall have a minimum of 25-foot setback. So again, it's clarifying what streets those setbacks would apply to. And finally, the last condition, the existing condition states: retain existing vegetation along the slope portion of the site bordering West 51st Street, which is to the south on the site plan, the very bottom of the site plan. The proposed new condition reads: retain existing vegetation along the slope portions of the site bordering West 51st Street for a minimum of 60 feet off the public right-of-way. Vegetation beyond the toe of the slope or beyond 60 feet from the right-of-way line may be removed during construction. If you can see on the site plan where the red arrow is pointing, that is approximately 60 feet from the West 51st right-of-way to the property. So you can see it does not impact any buildings. So again, the recommendation is to approve the amended conditions and carry over condition 1, 4, and 6. So staff recommends to approve the amended conditions.
Any questions for staff before we hear from the applicant? All right. Karen, you're muted.
Yes, I am. Sorry. Mr. Walters and Mr. Mike Price should be unmuted now and able to speak.
Thank you, Mike Price, MAD Engineers. So previously there were 6 conditions on the site, of which 3 we asked to amend. The first dealt with parking fronting. The way it was worded was not very clear, so we simply asked for a rewording that basically the intent, which was, as we understood it, was not to have parking lots facing any street. So the language has since been amended that says no parking shall front Central, Kirkland, or 51st Street. So we think that that's simply clarifying what the original intent was in the language. Second one, which was item number 3, buildings fronting Central, Kirkland, and 51st shall have a maximum of 25 feet. Well, we understand that the intent is they want to have 25 feet or more. The way it was originally worded was incorrect. So we changed that language to simply say a minimum of 25 feet. So if we need to be situated further away from any street, we have that ability. The way the language was previously written was erroneous as it related to that item. And then the last item deals with retaining the existing frontage. The way it was, or existing vegetation along 51st Street, it was somewhat undefined. It just said slope. Well, anything has a slope, even if it's a 0% slope. So what we did was to give it a specified distance, that being 60 feet from 51st Street. And I would just add that typically all that would be required in that instance would be a street yard of 8 feet. But again, going back to what the intent was, we recognize that the original intent has always been to provide a screen buffer against those residents there that live in the neighborhood adjoining us. So we simply specified a distance of 60 feet, which is certainly more than what is typically required in buffering, but we think is in the meeting the intent again what was originally proposed. So if there's any questions, that basically outlines the request and why there was a request as it relates to those specific conditions.
Mr. Chair, I have a question.
Thank you, Mr. Price. Councilman.
Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Price, what is that minimum buffer requirement outside of the proposed 60 feet?
Because it has a street yard, that would typically all it would be required, which would be one tree every 35 feet. But if this was a standard single family residential adjoining to this development, it would only be a 10-foot type C landscape buffer. So only 10 foot in width would be what is normally required. So this is 60 feet, and basically then just to retain the existing vegetation, which is, I think, a pretty good buffer. And I would also point out that there's quite a bit of grade differential between 51st Street and our side as we fall down some 20 plus feet below 51st Street. So they get sort of two different benefits as it relates to both the topography and the fact that it's a 60-foot buffer.
Okay, so this clarification on the conditions actually increases and locks down a wider buffer than normal, or what is required.
It is a wider buffer than what is normally required. The way that the original language was, it was sort of unspecified, and that would be hard for LDO to enforce because who knows what that actually meant. So that's why we asked for specified distance.
Okay, you kind of touched on my second question. That was, how was LDO going to determine that originally? So that answered that second question. Thank you. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Was there anybody else that was wanting to speak on behalf of the applicant? Karen, I thought there were two people.
I had Mr. Walters might speak, and he's unmuted, but I don't know. He might be choosing not to.
Mr. Price.
Yes, sir.
You know this Andrew Walworth?
Yes, yes, he's part of the development team. I think that my answers have addressed the conditions. I'm not certain what difficulties, if any, he may have, but
okay.
I think that addresses the issues that we would like to bring before the council.
Okay, thank you. All right, we'll hear from opposition.
Okay, I have 4 people listed in opposition, and just to give them a heads up that I will be unmuting them and allowing them to talk. The first will be Vanessa Jackson. Second, Bryant Hawkins, third, Sonia Brewer, and the fourth is Calvin Williams, and I believe someone might be speaking for him, but I'll go ahead and bring at least Vanessa and Bryant Hawkins in, allowing them to speak. And Vanessa and Bryant, you might need to unmute on your end.
Hey, so my name is Bryant Hawkins. I live at 27 West 51st Street, which is the first house on the right and the one that backs up to the 60-foot buffer that we're speaking about. I guess firstly, I'd like to say that I don't think anyone in this community, at least that I've talked to on my street, particularly wants this development. And I think that that should be taken into consideration as we look at this 60-foot buffer. I think it's really important to keep that buffer there, and I would love it to be more than the 60 feet that is there in the lift condition. Personally, I would love to see that put into a land trust and just be as it is. It is an ecosystem, and a lot of the houses on West 51st Street are covered by old oaks and built into the hillside. And I think that removing trees will begin to erode that and also put us at more risk of wind damage. There's quite a bit more that I'd like to say, but I want to make sure that all the other community members have their place to talk.
Thank you, Mr. Hawkins.
I'm muting Mr. Hawkins and unmuting Vanessa Jackson. Vanessa, okay.
Yes, I can. Can you all hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Vanessa Jackson. I live at 14 West 51st Street. I was reared at 16 West 51st Street, where my parents still reside. I live next door to them. They've lived on this street for nearly 50 years and raised all their children here. So we're lifelong residents of this community in the street. I'm opposed to uplifting or amending any conditions proposed by LDG or by staff, simply because, first of all, our community worked tirelessly on the street, getting out into the community, getting a petition list some couple of years back, advising our community of the changes that were being proposed on the old Frank Gates Trotter lot. In doing so, we came up with as best as we could certain protections that we want for the community. So if anything, we want to expand those protections, not to do anything to mitigate any of those protections. And we would like to be able to bring that issue back before our community. As you all very well know, these times are unprecedented. We're having to use virtual communications just to hold this meeting today. Many of the community members in our neighborhood do not have access to Zoom. They don't have access, some to computers. And if they do have access, they don't have the technical ability to be able to really tune into this meeting today. And our communication has been hindered because of COVID. Everybody's concerned with just trying to live. And so we don't have a means right now, as of yet, we don't have the time to really gather our neighborhood together or really put into place information streams to let them know about how these proposed uplifted conditions will impact our community. You all very well know the condition of our community and how we've been working and making pleas for other housing options other than a 241 unit apartment complex. We talked about wanting single family homes and townhomes and just the uplift and a facelift to attract more working families to our community, but not in a small space with a concentrated density of 240 units or more. We have several other apartment options in our community, and some of them are a lot smaller than 241. I think the Villages has 275 units. This will be the second largest apartment complex in our community if this proposal should advance. And we just want to make sure that it's done, if it's done, because we're really opposed to it, in a spirit of excellence. All development is not good development, but development can be good development if it's conducted in a way that the community, as well as those who are developing the property, work together for the benefit of not just the current of residents, but the future residents of our community. So I could say more, but I want to leave time for others to be able to speak. I do feel strongly that the timing of this is just all wrong for our community while we're distracted on the effects of COVID-19, and to do anything that's going to further erode the character of our community, I think needs to be it needs to be considered, or it needs to be a matter of being brought back before the community for consideration. And again, I'm asking for this not to be, or the conditions not to be uplifted, or at a minimum that this matter be deferred for no less than 60 days. Thank you.
Okay. I've unmuted Sonia Brewer. Sonia, you should be able to speak. You might need to unmute on your end. Miss Brewer? Miss Brewer, are you able to speak?
You all hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, we are. We can.
Oh, okay. It was kind of strange how to get this Zoom thing. But anyways, hello everyone. My name is Sonia Brewer, and I, like my neighbor Vanessa Jackson and her parents that live next to her, have been in this community and on this street, West 51st, for 34 years myself. And then it goes a little bit further than that. My grandparents used to own the house that I'm living in. And so I too would am requesting to, or would like to oppose to the uplifting of the conditions that were spoke about, and a deferral of 60 days. And I do agree with my neighbor Vanessa that these times that we're in, it's not a good time for this. Right now, we need to gather our community together, and like she said, if you're going to do this 60-foot thing, I would like to see that to be, have more protection there against this community here. Also, speaking about those apartments here, it seems that a lot of apartment, I guess, development is being thrown into this area, which I feel will make this area a lot more congested. And I too, like my neighbor, I thought there was going to be like homes, residents, not apartments. And so, yes, it concerns me as well as my neighbors, and I am opposing to the uplifting of the conditions.
Okay. Mr. Chair, I muted Ms. Brewer, and we have one more person that asked to speak, Mr. Calvin Williams. And I've reached out to the attendees a couple times. I don't see a Calvin Williams on the call. I do have two other Williams on the call, and asked if you could just raise your virtual hand, Mr. Williams, or if someone is speaking on behalf of Mr. Williams, so I know to unmute you and let you speak. So if we can, if there is someone here that is speaking on behalf of Mr. Calvin Williams who had requested to speak. Okay, Mr. Chair, I don't see a hand being raised, and we haven't, we've asked twice and haven't had someone respond.
All right.
So assuming, I guess, Mr. Williams is not on the call, and we have no one else registered to speak in opposition.
Okay, thank you. Before we hear from the applicant, were there any questions from the Planning Commission for the opposition? All right.
And Mr. Chair, sorry to interrupt. Mr. Wolders, the other person that's part of the applicant team, is on the call now. He is on the phone and just said that he could speak if you had a question for him, or if Mike Price needed him to speak, but he is on the call now should he be needed.
Okay, thank you. All right, Mr. Price.
I have a question for staff when it's applicable, sir.
All right.
And Mike, you are on the call. You should be. I'm going to unmute you. and you might need to unmute on your end, okay?
While we're waiting on Mr. Price to figure it out, Councilman Ledford.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Brian, my question's for you. I heard a couple of things from opposition I wanted to clarify. I kept hearing the word uplifting of conditions. I'm not sure what that means. We're not removing any conditions. Is that correct?
That is correct. The only thing that's
Okay.
happening is that the conditions are being amended.
And this clarification by naming the public streets actually gives LDO an enforcement opportunity otherwise that they may not have. So it actually strengthens the condition, does it not?
It does. That way everybody's on one page, you know what condition applies to what street. Because right now
Okay.
it's very ambiguous.
Great. And the question that I had for Mr. Price previously was that this amendment actually locks down the increased buffer of 60 feet, whereas it could be, as it's written now, less than 60 feet. And that question I may need to direct to Mr. Price.
Correct. You are correct. Right now it's not very clear of what that existing vegetation, how deep that should be.
Okay, so I was very concerned because I think that there's what I heard was that we are somehow removing conditions when in reality, we're actually strengthening them and giving LDO the tools they need to enforce them, which is something we wrestle with the city constantly. I just want to make sure I'm on the same page.
Right. On the condition, the current condition on the existing vegetation basically says retain existing vegetation along the slope portion of the site bordering West 51st Street. That
Okay.
doesn't state a depth. The proposed condition by the applicant does state that has to be at least 60 foot.
Okay. All right. I just want to make sure because I thought that's what I was hearing, sir. Thank you.
You're correct.
Thank you,
You're
Chairman.
correct.
All right,
All right, Mr. Chairman, can you hear me now?
we can, thank you.
As per the previous dialogue that just took place between Councilman Ledford and Mr. Schultz, that is correct. The language really has been strengthened in terms of giving specifics where it was ambiguous as it related to those three particular items or had been misworded previously. So the concerns that were addressed as it related to thinking that somehow this was minimizing the protections that had previously been set forth in the original language is not correct, or that fear is, I guess, basically unfounded. And then instead, this actually ties down specific language that helps us from the development standpoint be able to specifically meet the language and not be in its present form, which is somewhat ambiguous. So I hope that answers the question of those in opposition that while they may not want the apartment development, that decision had previously already been made, and all this is simply doing is taking those previous conditions and setting them forth in a manner that everyone understands and then can move forward with as it relates to the development. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion when you're ready.
Councilman Ledford, before we do that, I just want to address the fact that I can see in these chats that one of the panelists does have a question who had already spoken in opposition, and just wanted to remind everybody that we do hear from opposition, then we hear from the applicant, and then the planning commission moves or takes action on the item. And so there's really not an opportunity in the way that we conduct this meeting for follow-up questions from opposition. With that, Councilman Ledford.
Mr. Chairman, I think that this language actually fortifies the conditions as previously stated and gives LDO the tools they need to enforce it, which is actually the benefit of the community. And I would always vote in favor of something that benefited the community and gave them more protection. So I would move to approve.
Second.
Thank you, Councilman Ledford, for the motion, and Mr. Matthews for properly seconding that motion. Any discussion? All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Okay, Bailey,
Aye.
Ledford,
Yes.
Palmer,
Yes.
Hyatt,
Yes.
Barone,
Yes.
Farmer,
Yes.
Wilson, Lehman,
Yes.
Bankston,
Yes.
Coker, Matthews,
Yes.
Maybe,
Yes.
Parks,
Yes.
Payne. Chairman Call, you might just remind the audience too what happens next after this, so that for those who come to some of these cases.
Yes, so these cases do go on to city council. I'm not exactly sure what those dates are off the top of my head, but they will be heard at council in June, probably what, the second Tuesday in June, I would guess.
That is correct.
That should be June 9th.
All right. Next case on the agenda is case 2020-0049. This is 6500 block of Hunt Drive, and it's an application to rezone from R1 residential to R4 special zone. And this has a staff recommendation to approve with conditions. Karen, is there any opposition present?
There's not for this case, Mr. Chair, and just for this entire section, which is case 49, 52, 61, and 64, we have no opposition registered to speak for those 4 cases.
Okay, but we do have a staff recommendation to approve with conditions. Are these conditions that staff has placed on these cases or conditions that the applicant had placed on it?
These are staff placed conditions or staff recommended conditions.
Okay, so in each one of these cases, Karen, can you tell me whether or not we have the applicant wishes to speak on case 2020-0049?
I can, hold on one second. So I have that as the applicant to speak is Joseph Ingram. And I'm going to bring him into the call, and I'm allowing him to speak now.
Mr. Ingram, what I'd like to know is, are you okay with the conditions that we have here in front of us?
Yes, we are.
Okay.
Move to approve.
Second.
We have a motion to approve, and that motion has been properly seconded. Any discussion?
And for the record, I have Maybe as the motion or Ledford as the second.
Correct.
All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Bailey,
Aye.
Ledford,
Yes.
Palmer,
Yes.
Hyatt,
Yes.
Barone,
Yes.
Farmer,
Yes.
Wilson, Lehman,
Yes.
Bankston,
Yes.
Coker, Matthews,
Aye.
Maybe,
Aye.
Parks,
Aye.
Payne. Okay, it carries.
Next case is 2020-0052, and this is located at 8940 and 8944 Fuller Road, and is an application to rezone from A1 to RTZ. And we do have some conditions. It has a staff recommendation to approve with conditions. Is the applicant present?
I unmuted Mr. Freeman, and he's on the call. Aaron Freeman.
Yes, this is Aaron Freeman. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. I do have one question as on behalf of Tom Freeman, who's actually the owner. He actually had a heart attack recently and handed this to me. And that was on the one curb cut on the Fuller Road. My understanding, there is no curb or sidewalk there, and trying to understand the clarification on the curb cut.
I can speak to that.
Mr. Bridger.
Yeah, I think we've had other cases where we're trying to limit the number of curb cuts on a kind of a collector street. And so I recall, Brian, correct me if I'm wrong, I thought we reached out to the county transportation folks on this. And so the concern is trying to limit the number of curb cuts. That creates a safety issue for using that road. And so that's the reason for limiting it to like one shared drive. I don't know if Todd wants to add anything to that.
No, you're right. One connection to Fuller Road.
So one connection for all 5 houses?
Correct.
Okay.
Aaron, thanks for being on this call with us today. And you may not be, I don't know exactly how familiar you are with the case, but I guess what we would want to know as planning commission members is, that we have these 2 conditions in front of us with this application. Both of these conditions are coming from staff. One of them is that no more than 5 dwelling units go on the property. And the second is that all 5 of those dwelling units are served with 1 curb cut. And what we would typically want to hear from the applicant is their opinion on those conditions and whether or not they're okay or not okay with those conditions. So do you have anything to add?
Yes, the five dwelling units are not an issue. We actually provided to the commission a layout. We had, I guess, understanding the definition of a curb cut now is we actually have 5 dwellings, but we're proposing 3, I guess, curb cuts, 2 houses per driveway, and then the 5th house would actually be on a hill, would have its own curb cut. Is there any way to get just maybe 2 curb cuts? Or 3 potentially. We proposed 3 for 5 houses. I could probably get it down to 2. Could we propose 2 cuts potentially? I'm trying to figure out. I'm here, or I have made deferred for 30 days and kind of rework my engineering on this. But I know I can definitely do 2 curb cuts with looking at this. I'm looking at the drawing right now.
Right. So it's certainly possible for you to ask for a deferral for 30 days. It's not uncommon. I can just speak to what we typically see at Planning Commission, where people are using RTZ and they're building narrower lots to limit the number of curb cuts to prevent, you've got these 65 and 40-foot wide lots here.
It should be 150 by 65 and 40, I believe. Yes.
Right. So, certainly an option for you to ask for the case to be deferred. But we wanted to make sure we at least heard you. So with that, Adam, or Aaron, I think it is, give me just a second to address the Planning Commission. Does anybody on the Planning Commission have any questions or want to hear the staff report on this?
No, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I would like to know, was there any opposition?
There is no opposition.
There is no opposition. I would actually like to go ahead and make a motion that we approve this with condition, however, condition number 2 with 2 curb cuts.
Second.
We have a motion to approve, and the condition number 2 changed to 2 curb cuts on Fuller Road, and that was properly seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Bailey,
No.
Ledford,
Yes.
Palmer,
Yes.
Hyatt,
Yes.
Barone,
Yes.
Farmer,
Yes.
Wilson, Lehman,
No.
Bankston,
Yes.
Coker, Matthews,
Aye.
Maybe,
Aye.
Parks,
Aye.
Payne. So I just noted 2 no votes on that, but it still passes.
Thank you, Mr. Bridger. Next case on the agenda is case 2020-0061. This is located at 11900 Block Armstrong Road, and it's an application to rezone from A1 to R1 and has a staff recommendation to approve with conditions. I'd like to hear simply from the applicant whether or not they're okay with those conditions. So if you could, Karen, take the applicant off mute, and all I want to hear is, are you okay with the conditions or not?
Mike, you should be able to speak.
Yes, so the condition of a maximum of 140 dwelling units, we are fine with that condition. And we, just for the information for the commissioners, we do plan to come back with a PUD overlay because of a recent action that the commission took back in February as it relates to lot sizes and the health department.
All right, thank you, Mr. Price. What's the will of the commission?
Move to approve with conditions.
We have
Second.
a motion from Mr. Farmer and a second from Mr. Maybe. Any discussion? All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Bailey,
Aye.
Ledford,
Yes.
Palmer,
Yes.
Hyatt,
Yes.
Barone,
Yes.
Farmer,
Yes.
Wilson, Lehman,
Yes.
Bankston,
Yes.
Coker, Matthews,
Aye.
Maybe,
Aye.
Parks,
Aye.
Payne. Motion carries.
Mr. Chair, you're muted.
So I guess I need to repeat all that.
Yes.
Only I heard that. Okay, so case 2020-0064 located at 1253, 1257, and 1265 East 13th Street is an application to rezone from M1 and R3 to UGC. Is the applicant present?
The applicant is present, Mr. Chair. We have an applicant from HK Architects, and I am allowing him to talk now. And just a reminder, you might need to unmute on your end.
What I'd like to hear from the applicant is whether or not you're okay with the conditions that are proposed here.
Yes, good afternoon. This is Chris Dufresne from Heffley and Kronberg Architects. The proposed development is for an apartment in the existing building, and as such, we are okay with the staff recommendation to limit this to residential use.
Move to approve with conditions.
Second, and that guy needs to be on the radio.
We have a motion to approve and it has been properly seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Bailey,
Aye.
Ledford,
Yes.
Palmer,
Yes.
Hyatt,
Yes.
Barone,
Yes.
Farmer,
Yes.
Wilson,
Yes.
Lehman,
Yes.
Bankston,
Yes.
Matthews,
Aye.
Maybe,
Aye.
and Parks,
Aye.
and Payne. Mr. Cobb, who's the first, the motion seconder on that one, if you don't mind, for the record?
I think it was.
This is me, Palmer.
Okay,
I think I seconded it.
thank you, guys.
Mr. Chairman, the next three cases under special exceptions permits and rezoning, which is case 2020-58, 2020-60, and 2020-59 are all associated one piece of property.
All right. Thank you. So in regards to the following three cases, 2020-0058, 0060, and 0059, they have a staff recommendation to approve, and 0060 is with conditions. Is there any opposition present?
There is no opposition on the call for either three cases, Mr. Chair.
The applicant present.
The applicant is present and I am allowing him to speak. Mr. Price, you should be able to speak if you unmute on your end.
Mr. Price, what we'd like to know is whether or not you're okay with the conditions.
We do accept the conditions. Thank you.
Everybody else might have heard that, but I didn't hear that. What'd you say, Mr. Price?
I'm sorry. Yes, we do accept staff conditions.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, would you allow a motion on all three of these cases, or do we need to do them individually?
Mr. Bridger.
I hate to say this, but we got to do them individually.
Okay. All right, on case 2020.
Chairman, I have a question for applicant.
Councilman Ledford.
Thank you. Is it Mr. Price?
Yes.
Mr. Price, have we had a community meeting on this case yet, or this rezoning?
We have not had a community meeting on this specific one. We did have a community meeting not quite a year ago on the first one. So this is a expansion of the first request, is essentially what this involves. But no,
Okay,
there's not been a meeting.
Okay, that makes sense. So if I might recommend that Commissioner Smedley be advised of this, I'm not sure that she is, and before it moves on to County Commission.
We will do so. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I move to approve 0058.
Second.
We have a motion from Mr. Matthews and it has been seconded from Mr. Farmer. Any discussion? All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Bailey.
Aye.
Ledford.
Yes.
Palmer.
Yes.
Hyatt.
Yes.
Barone.
Yes.
Farmer.
Yes.
Wilson. Lehman.
Yes.
Bankston.
Yes.
Coker. Matthews.
Aye.
Maybe. Maybe.
Aye.
Parks.
Aye.
Payne. Motion carries.
Thank you. On case 2020-0060, we have a staff recommendation to approve with conditions. What's the will of the commission?
Move to approve with conditions.
Second.
Second.
We have a motion to approve from Mr. Matthews, and I think that second came from Councilman
Ledford. Yep.
Any discussion? All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Bailey.
Aye.
Ledford.
Yes.
Palmer.
Yes.
Hyatt.
Yes.
Barone.
Yes.
Farmer.
Yes.
Wilson. Lehman.
Yes.
Bankston.
Yes.
Coker. Matthews.
Aye.
Maybe. Parks.
Yeah.
Payne. Motion carries.
Next case on the agenda is case 2020-0059. And this case has a staff recommendation to approve. What's the will of the commission?
Move to
Move to
approve.
approve.
That's Matthews, I think.
Yes.
Second.
So we have Mr. Matthews making the motion and Councilman Ledford seconding that. Any discussion? All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Bailey.
Aye.
Ledford.
Yes.
Palmer.
Yes.
Hyatt.
Yes.
Barone.
Yes.
Farmer.
Yes.
Wilson. Lehman.
Yes.
Bankston.
Yes.
Coker. Matthews.
Aye.
Maybe. Parks.
Yes.
Payne. Motion carries.
Mr. Chairman, on the next case, which is 2020-0043, we did receive an email from the applicant to officially request a 30-day deferral on this case.
All right, Mr. Schultz, I have the next case as 2020.
6-2.
Oh, sorry. I'm sorry, I jumped ahead.
All right. Case 2020-0062 is located at 2100 block of Jenkins Road and 7950 Fred Lane. And this is a special permit for a PUD, and it has a staff recommendation to approve. Is there any opposition present?
No one is registered to speak, Mr. Chair.
What's
Mr. Chair,
the,
this is in my district. I'm familiar with the project. I'd like to move to approve.
we have a motion to approve, and Mr. Farmers seconded that. Any discussion? All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Bailey,
Aye.
Ledford,
Yes.
Palmer,
Yes.
Hyatt,
Yes.
Varone,
Yes.
Farmer,
Yes.
and I think Commissioner Wilson is here with us. Commissioner Wilson? That's all.
Yes.
There you go. Thank you. Lehman,
Yes.
Bankston,
Yes.
Coker, Matthews,
Aye.
maybe, Parks,
Yes.
Payne. Motion carries.
All right, the next case on the agenda is 2020-0043, and the applicant has requested to defer for 30 days. This is the one that's located at 6402 Shalford Road. Karen, is there any opposition present?
No one's asked to speak, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chair, to defer 60 days to July 13th.
We've got the applicant's requesting 30 days. Did you intend to say 60?
I did intend to say 60, sir. I had conversation with Councilwoman Burrs this weekend, and she really feels that this needs to be a one-on-one meeting with the community and needs to be in person, and that 60 days will allow that to happen.
All right.
Second.
Well, we do have a motion to defer for 60 days, and it has been properly seconded. Karen, is the applicant on the line?
The applicant for this is Mike Price, and he is on the line, and he is unmuted.
Okay, Mr. Price, you've requested a 30-day deferral. We've not given you an opportunity to talk, and the Planning Commission has made a motion and properly seconded it for a 60-day deferral. We do need to hear from you.
We do accept 60 days. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Price. With that, is there any discussion on the motion? All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Bailey.
Yeah.
Ledford,
Yes.
Palmer,
Yes.
Hyatt,
Yes.
Varone,
Yes.
Farmer,
Yes.
Wilson,
Yes.
Lehman,
Yes.
Bankston,
Yes.
Coker, Matthews,
Aye.
maybe,
Aye.
Parks,
Aye.
Payne. Motion carries.
All right, next case on the agenda is case 2020-0045, and this is located at 1515 East 14th Street and is an application to rezone from R1 and RTZ.
To.
Well, it says and, but I think it's two. And this has a staff recommendation to deny. Karen, is there any opposition present?
There is one person who would like to speak in opposition, and the applicant is on the call.
Okay, thank you, Karen. Mr. Schultz?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. This is a request to rezone from R1 residential zone to RT1 residential townhouse, RTZ for single family dwelling. It's 0.16 acres, 2 units per acre, has a density of 12.5 dwelling units per acre. Location, this is in Highland Park. You can see to the left of the screen is South Highland Park Avenue. To the right of the side, which is highlighted in yellow, is South Holly Street. And then, of course, to the south is Main Street. This property is located at 1515 East 14th Street. Here's a view of the site. You can see the notification sign. This is looking from the South Holly Street. This is another view of the site looking from East 14th Street of a house under construction. This is also on the same piece of property to the rear. Looks like a secondary single-family dwelling unit. So on this property, there's 2 single-family detached dwellings, which is not permitted by right in the R1 single family zone. You have to have one structure per lot. This is a view of some of the single family homes that are adjacent to the site. This is another view of some of the single family homes that are adjacent to the site. Again, this is currently zoned R1. To the north is R1, to the south is R1, to the east and west is R1. There are further west some RTZ requests, and to the northeast is some RTZ as well. There's been some zoning history adjacent to this property. You can see the little blue dot, that's the subject property we're talking about today. But to the northwest in 2019, we had a similar request to rezone from R1 to RTZ. This is cases withdrawn at City Council. Planning Commission recommended to approve the request. RPA staff had a recommendation to deny based on the proposed density exceeding the 12 units per acre, proposed lot size, and proposed lot orientation was the reason RPA staff recommended to deny. Here again is the site highlighted in red, about 4 or 5 lots to the west of this site. In 2019, this property was rezoned from R1 to RTZ with conditions, single family detached only. Vehicular access and parking shall be from the rear alley, which there's a rear alley that runs to the rear of this property, and property being subdivided into no more than 2 residential lots. To the northwest or northeast of this site, again, the site's highlighted in red. In 2017, this property was rezoned from R1 to RTZ with similar conditions, limiting the subdivision to 2 lots, parking access from the rear, and shall be developed with single-family residences only. It's interesting to look at the map. These lots are all oriented north and south. And same thing with the one to the west of the site. The orientation was to the north and south. Just a reminder what R1 permitted uses are. R1 has single-family detached dwelling as a permitted use, but the R1 has very large lot size and lot frontages of 60 foot of lot frontage and a 7,500 square foot lot size, and minimum setback of 25 from the front and rear and 10 feet on the side. RTZ zone basically allows single-family detached dwellings and townhouses and 0 lot line dwellings. One of the differences in RTZ, it also reduces the lot width and there is no lot size. It's based on density. In this case, this is inside the urban overlay. The density is 12 dwelling units per acre max with a minimum lot width of 25 foot. And it has a side setback of 10, but it can be reduced depending on what the adjacent zones are. Some of the, again, the site is highlighted in yellow. Everything around this site is primarily single-family detached residential to the north, south, east, and west. This is just showing adjacent compatibility. The lot in question is highlighted in the green circle. Their intention is to divide a lot, which is that little brown structure I just showed earlier, on its own separate lot. Therefore, the lot will be oriented west and east and west. The orientation is different. If you look along South Holly Street, all the lots in terms of the orientation are north and south. There are no environmental features on this property in terms of steep slopes or floodplains. This is in the Tennessee Temple Highland Park Master Plan, which is adopted in 1999, which recommends single unit residential for the subject property. The request for 2 single-family homes on a smaller lot is compatible with land use recommendation. It's also important to note that this property falls in the Area 3 plan, which is the historic River to Ridge plan, which is in the final stages of adoption. So with that, staff recommendation is to deny the request. The proposed use is compatible with adopted land use plan and the surrounding uses and development form. However, it's not consistent with the lot configuration and pattern of the block. The proposed density is not compatible with the surrounding density and does not meet the RTZ density requirements of 12 units per acre. The proposed request is not compatible with surrounding development form, as I mentioned earlier, in terms of lot size, lot frontage, and orientation. One of the things that staff noted in the staff report, if there was a tool that allowed accessory dwelling units in the R1 zone, then this request may be more compatible with adjacent development form while still allowing for a smaller secondary detached dwelling unit on the property. So staff recommends to deny the request.
Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Mr. Maybe.
Quick question for Mr. Schultz. So it appears since there's already 2 buildings on this lot, what would be the results or the result of us denying this request?
One of those units would not be able to be occupied because it does not meet the standards of the R1 zone. I reached out to LDO trying to figure out how the secondary or the little home in the white, how that was able to receive a building permit. And that was prior to the COVID-19 shutting the city down. And I have not heard back. LDO was checking into that, but I've not heard any response back from them on how that building was even permitted.
Thank you.
All right, we'll hear from the applicant first.
Okay, Christina Williams, you have been unmuted and you should be able to speak to Planning Commission.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Awesome. What is it that you need to hear from me?
Well, we've seen the application, had the opportunity to hear from staff. It's good for us to hear from the applicant just firsthand why you're requesting it and just help us better understand the issue.
Sure. My hopes were to go ahead and finish out the new build and sell it, and then kind of go ahead and keep the smaller one as a rental. It needs extensive renovation right now. Like, it's really unlivable. But it's a really unique size for the neighborhood because there's a lot of single family dwelling homes that are more like 1,200 square feet, 15. And this one is really unique in that it's just significantly smaller. I don't know if that helps. So hold on. Yeah, so I didn't really realize how much of an issue this was. And here we are. Is there any specific questions I could answer?
That's a good question. Does any of the Planning Commission members have any questions for the applicant?
Mr. Chairman, I have one for Brian at the proper time.
Yeah, I do too for Brian.
Okay. Christina, it sounds like we've got a couple questions for staff and not necessarily for you. So we'll have those questions to staff, and then we'll hear from opposition, and then you'll have an opportunity to speak after we hear from opposition. We'll go with Mr. Matthews and then Councilman Ledford to staff.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Brian, now it seems to me like am I reading this right or not, that they're actually just trying to come in compliance. If they've already got 2 structures there, they're just trying to find a tool to allow them to do that. Is there another tool that would allow them to do that?
You would have to go to R3 zone, some other zone that allows multiple structures on one lot. Right now, my understanding, based on the applicant's indication, one of those structures is not, there's nobody living in it. So you can have one structure with someone living in it. You just cannot have the second unit occupied.
Okay, thank you.
You ready for?
Yeah, Councilman Ledford.
Thank you. Brian, can you rewind and go back over the LDO concern you raised a moment ago? You said you'd reached out to them with a question, and I was wondering, you said you did not hear from them yet?
I had reached out to LDO. This case is actually supposed to be heard in April. Because that structure to the rear, I have the site plan pulled up, the one to the top of the page, that structure exists. So I was reaching out to them, if you knew that structure was there, how are they able to get a secondary permit for this existing structure?
Okay, that's kind of where my question lies as well. And we have no response from LDO yet?
They were checking into it, and I have not heard back from Charlie Young on that.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chairman.
Ryan, I have a question.
Yes.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman. I assume it's okay for me to ask it.
Yes, Mr. Bailey.
Thank you. In some of the cases on today's agenda, they made reference to the historic River to Ridge plan. I didn't see that reference on this case. If I missed it, can you tell me how does the River to Ridge plan review? How would it respond to this? Is in that plan area, I think. And
It is. It is. And I don't have that plan pulled up. Maybe John can look for that while I'm trying to answer your question. Again, this case was submitted for April PC, and in April, we were not really that close to adopting Area 3, or Plan Commission was not close to adopting the Area 3 historic River to Ridge. And the cases that were submitted for May, yes, you're about a week away from adopting Area 3. So we felt the cases for May, we should follow the new plan recommendation. So that's why you see some cases follow the plan recommendation of Area 3, which is those cases that would be reviewed today in May. The ones in April would follow under the old existing plans. I'm not sure. I'm sure this would be urban residential, would be my recommendation or suspicion. So which means single family dwellings on this particular lot. I don't know if John is able to pull that up yet or
Yeah, I'm
not.
looking at it right now, Brian. What street is it between? What street is it on again?
We go back to the South Holly and
what corner?
14th.
Highland Park.
It's 14th.
It's 14th and South Holly. I would suspect that's urban residential.
Okay, give me 1 second. It is urban residential, which actually, Brian, if it's at 14th, and would that mean that's just one block off of Main, right?
Yes, one block.
So if it's urban residential, it would allow up to 4 unit configure. It would be supportive of 4 unit configure, up to 4.
Okay. Which that RTZ zone would be the way to do that, or R3.
Yep.
Or R3MD basically.
So would that then be a soft denial?
Yes, a lot of this, when this new, I would say a lot of this new information, I mean, as you know, a lot of our emphasis was on a lot of the new cases, and the ones you mentioned, we had reference to the plan were the cases for May. So we just, quite frankly, missed this one as relates to connecting back to the Area 3.
If this were to come through, make application today or after Area 3 was, and I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, for butting in. I'm just trying to get clarification. If this was made application after Area 3 is adopted, then this would come from staff with approval?
Yes.
All right, thank you. My apologies, Chairman.
All right, I think we do have some opposition present. We need to make sure to give them an opportunity to speak. Karen, are they on the line?
They are. Mr. Heckman is unmuted and should be able to speak.
Yes, Dan Heckman here. I live a few blocks away. I can't speak on behalf of the Highland Park Neighborhood Association. We've not had an opportunity to have a public meeting on this. I did speak with the developer last week. I've also spoken with 5, 6, 7 neighbors who live or own property within a block or so of this parcel. The overwhelming consensus that I've heard from them, which I concur with, is that rezoning this in order to split that lot into multiple parcels is not a favorable option. Overall, fans of density, fans of having a smaller structure on the lot similar to an accessory dwelling unit, fans of keeping that structure, the original structure, the smaller one in the rear, existing as an affordable rental property in some form or fashion. Would love to see some sort of variance that grandfathers 2 structures onto this lot. But the consensus from the neighbors that I've spoken to and my desire would not be to subdivide this parcel.
All right, Karen, have we got?
That's the only person who wished to speak in opposition.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Maybe.
I guess for my clarification, Mr. Schultz, is the applicant's not asking to subdivide it, or they are asking to subdivide it?
Once it's rezoned, the applicant will have to subdivide it to get those structures on separate lots.
Would they need to do that if they were going R3 instead?
No, if they were going to R3, they would not have to subdivide. They could keep them on the same lot or R3MD.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, with that, we do have the opportunity here again from the applicant. Is she still on the line, Christina?
Yes, Ms. Williams?
Hey, yes, it is. I am seeking to separate the lots ultimately, and kind of in nodding to what he was saying was I am helping to keep it as a small rental in the area. So I'm not trying to overbuild it or really massively develop it or anything like that. I'm really just trying to come back into compliance and have two separate single family dwellings. Initially, so with the permitting, I don't fully know, I don't understand the offices and what's going on there. I just know from my end that I was working with another contractor, like a more experienced one, and he assured me it wasn't going to be an issue, and I don't really know how that worked out. And we've since then split, so I'm not working with him anymore, but now I'm kind of left holding the bag, trying to figure out what to do with two houses on the same lot. So I don't know if that lends any clarity for you guys, but that's really where I'm coming from on this side.
Okay, I think that's helpful.
I have a question for Ms. Williams, Chairman.
Councilman Ledford.
Thank you. Ms. Williams, have you contacted Councilman Byrd and discussed this with him at all?
I haven't. I didn't know that was something I should do.
I would just make the recommendation, whichever way this goes today, I would definitely reach out with him and make contact before this moves on to City Council if it is approved.
Okay.
That will give you about a month in between to maybe get more clarity or even come up with whichever way this falls. I just want to make that recommendation, ma'am.
Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
All right. With that, what's the will of the commission?
Mr. Chairman, I have a comment I'd like to make. ADU would be ideal in this situation. I don't know how close we are to making that kind of thing happen. I tend to agree, even based on the Area 3 plan and the intent of these internal blocks, even though it's really close to Maine, keeping this lot kind of unified seems like the better option rather than splitting it. Again, I don't, based on what I've heard, I don't understand that we have the right tool to make that happen at this juncture. But, it seems like the intent of what the property owner is trying to do meets the intent of the new Area 3 plan. And maybe this is a question for staff, just to clarify what our options are here.
John?
So basically, you've got for multi-unit on a small lot like this, R3 is really the only other tool, the next level up, where you could do multi-unit on a lot without having to subdivide. Is that right, Brian?
Yes, you can do R3MD as well.
Yep.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Maybe.
I see potential for some common ground here in terms of being able to work out a solution that I think would address the neighborhood's concern. Plus, it sounds like with the new area plan coming up that has had an influence on the staff's take on their recommendation. I would like to make a motion to defer this for 30 days and encourage the applicant to coordinate with staff and also the neighbors to see if we can see how to work out something that hopefully will be amenable to all the parties.
All right, we have a motion to defer.
Second.
And that has been properly seconded by Councilman Ledford.
I have a question at the appropriate time.
I'm sorry, Mr. Farmer.
Just at the appropriate time, I've got a question.
Okay, any discussion, Mr. Farmer?
So I'll support Chris's motion for sure. Would the staff review change between now and next month if we approved the Area 3 plan?
I'll let John answer that. And while I'm talking real quick, I failed to mention one other thing. Based on the current zoning, the applicant could submit for variance request under a subdivision plat for lot size and lot frontage. That's another option, keeping the R1 and applying for variance request. While that John answer.
What would that hardship be, Brian?
That's the difficult part. It'd be self-imposed hardship because
Okay.
you're creating your own lots.
Just wanted to throw that out there.
Yep, I agree.
Yes, essentially, I mean, you really only have for multi units. Again, the emphasis being multiple units on the same lot. You're essentially stuck with R3 and R3MD. That would accommodate with if you're trying to do that without dividing the property. As you know, we are working on some tools, but they're not going to be ready in a timely fashion as far as relates to this case. So that's kind of what we're stuck with. As you know, what we do with these situations, to get by, we have to put some conditions on it to customize the zone to the site. But in terms of getting, if you're trying to get a situation, we have 2 units on a lot. Right now, our options are R3 and R3MD.
John, I think Commissioner Farmer was asking about, if we defer 30 days and after Area 3 plans adopted, would staff's recommendation change based on that?
I mean, I think based on the new policy, we would support either RTZ, R2, or R3.
Right.
So and maybe 30 days is not enough, and sooner or later she's got to get a CO. So we can't hold this thing. We can't hold this thing up for long. I guess from my point of view, we have all this new information we all think is about to become official. So I know that the policy typically is not for staff to change their recommendation on a deferral, but maybe this is the case where you could look at that, since we very well may be adopting a plan that has direct effect on this case between now and the next planning commission meeting.
Right, and I would say based on the urban residential policy narrative, again, this property is on a corner, as y'all know. When you look at secondary uses, being on a corner is a key part of that. It's 2 units. It's well within the primary range of uses of up to 4. So I think we might add some conditions because, again, as you know, the R3 and R3MD don't fit this as good as it could in an urban way. So other than that, we would probably recommend approval.
Yeah. Mr. Chairman, I don't know. I think one of Commissioner Palmer's other questions was about the ADU. I don't know if, John, you want to cover that real quick? If Ethan,
well,
that's okay, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, sure. In the current context, it's just another unit. So again, R3, R2, R3MD would be R2. It's another type. As you know, we don't have an ADU tool. We need one. And hopefully, as we look at these new urban zone tools, we'll have that as a part of the mix. It's desperately needed. But I think as it stands now, our options are R2, R3MD, and R3.
Mr. Chairman, going back to what Ms. Williams had said, and I followed, I don't know whether she would accept 2 units on her. She's wanting them separated.
Right.
So you need to go back to her and see if she'd accept that. I mean, she was.
Well, I think at the moment, we do have a motion, and that is to defer for 30 days. But I think that's a good point and probably worth Ms. Williams tracking with, is that, you know, as if we were to defer this for 30 days, you would want to make sure to follow up with staff on what those options might be. If it were R3, I don't know that it would allow for subdivision of the property. And if your intent is to subdivide them, it sounds like what you need is RTZ. So with that, if there's no further comment, I'd like to take a roll call on the motion that we have. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Blythe Bailey,
Aye.
Ledford,
Yes.
Palmer,
Yes.
Hyatt,
Yes.
Barone,
Yes.
Farmer,
Yes.
Wilson,
Yes.
Lehman,
Yes.
Bankston,
Yes.
Coker,
Yes.
Matthews,
Aye.
Maybe,
Aye.
Parker,
Yes.
Parks, sorry, Payne. All
All
right,
right,
passes.
thank you. And I guess with that motion, it's just important for both the applicant and staff to have taken our comments into consideration, in that our hope is that when we see this again in 30 days, there's maybe a little bit more clarity in what it would look like to move this forward. There is quite a hardship in the fact that there is already the building built, and certainly a need to address in that area. So next case on the agenda is case 2020-0051, and that is located at 1006 East 14th Street. This is an application to rezone R3 to UGC and has a staff recommendation to deny. Is there any opposition present?
No one signed up to speak in opposition, and the applicant is on the call.
Okay, and before we jump into this, John and Mr. Schultz, this also would be in the Area 3 plan, right?
That is correct.
That is correct. And it is, the place type for this is mixed residential, which would not support a wide open UGC. It's primarily based on residential.
Okay. All right. Mr. Schultz, I'd like to hear from you before we hear from the applicant.
Okay, Mr. Chairman. This is a request to rezone from R3 to UGC, Urban General Commercial Zone, for new office/warehouse with possible mixed use residential above the office. It's 0.267 acres in size. This property is located at the corner of Fagan and 14th Street. You can see Central Avenue to the west or left of the screen, Fagan Street in the middle, and then East Main Street. It's about 1 block off of East Main Street. Here's a view of the site looking from 14th Street. This is east of the site. The site is just in the middle here in the vacant land. This is the home to the left. Here's a single family home to the right or the west of the site. This is north of the site. It's industrial use. And this is south of the site as its office. This is just showing you an aerial view of the site. The site is right here in the middle between these two trees. And you can see the developments taking place to the south along East Main Street. This is currently zoned R3. To the north is M1 zoning. To the northeast is R3. To the east of this site is R3. And to the south is M1. To the west, immediately to the west is R3. And then once you go across Fagan Street, you do have UGC at the corner of Fagan and 14th. Then you transition to R3, and then further west, you have RTZ. There's no zoning history on this site, but there is zoning history nearby at the corner of Fagan and 14th. In 2017, the property on the corner of Fagan and East Main was rezoned from C2 to UGC. And then in 2018, just to the north of this site along East 14th and Fagan, this property was rezoned from R3 to RTZ, and then ultimately approved for UGC and further in 2018 because of an extension of the development to the south. Some of the permitted uses in R3 are single family dwellings, 2-family dwellings, multifamily dwellings, boarding, lodging, and bed and breakfast establishments. UGC does change the uses that would be permitted in terms of it opens it up to retail and service establishments, offices, motels and hotels, restaurants, residential dwellings, excluding single family and 2-family, and auto-oriented uses. Again, some of the adjacent uses are manufacturing to the north, to the west is single family detached, to the south is commercial, and to the east is single family detached residential and vacant land. There are no floodplains or steep slopes on this property. Again, as mentioned, this is in the historic River to Ridge Plan, Area 3 plan, which again is in the currently in adoption phases. It recommends mixed residential, which would not support a wide open UGC at this location, as the use of mixed residential is primarily based on residential uses. Staff recommends to deny the request. There are existing industrial and warehouse uses nearby the property. There are some uses permitted in the UGC zone that have potential to create nuisances. The UGC zone is intended to be located along arterial or collector streets, whereas East 14th Street is categorized as a local street. And approving UGC at this location will set the precedent for future requests along East 14th Street, which would change the form and change the historic residential pattern on the south side of East 14th Street. So staff recommends to deny based on those three reasonings.
Thank you, Mr. Schultz. Any questions for staff before we hear from the applicant? All right. Karen, I'd like to.
Applicant's been unmuted and should be able to speak.
Thank you.
I'm here.
Okay, we can hear you. Thanks.
Okay, I've submitted some supplemental information since I received the denial. The photograph is a picture of what you see looking, standing on the property. So also the historic components of that street have already been changed because you've approved UGC just basically 2 lots down. The house next door that is noted as single family detached residential is actually being used and is a duplex. We're certainly willing to discuss conditions. We don't mind doing a residential component. We do not want but 3 stories. And I think we have a 100,000 square foot manufacturing facility across the street that is over 300 feet long. And if you also look at my vacancy chart, there is a high history of vacancies for the single family residential component on the street. And if you look across the street, they're basically duplexes that are not technically historical. They were built in the 60s and 70s. And this would be an improvement to the street. This property owner has a business adjacent to this property and just wants to expand it, and is certainly very willing to discuss options for UGC. That's it.
All right, thank you, Ms. Price. Any questions for the applicant?
I'll ask, Mr. Chairman, if you don't care.
Councilman Ledford.
Ms. Price, you've sounded like you indicated you would like some more time to bake this project in the oven and maybe come back with some conditions.
Sure, if it's conditions that it takes for us to be able to develop this property, I'm a designer and I'm certainly sympathetic to the residential component and the height of this. We're not interested in building a 4-story building. So absolutely, I'd like to meet with RPA and discuss what would make everybody feel comfortable so that we can proceed appropriately for this neighborhood.
Very good. Thank you very much. Thank you, Chairman.
Well, I just want to point something out. It is not necessarily the case that every deferral means that they come back in 30 days with the staff recommendation. So it might be that John or Brian or Karen would reiterate that. I understand the applicant has suggested that we could defer the case, but has also suggested that that case would be deferred and then potentially some sort of solution come up with such that there might be a staff recommendation to approve, and just want to clarify that that is not always the case. So
that is correct, Chair.
That's correct.
And I think so just to be a good example of looking beyond the project to the zone and the block. So as you know, as part of the planning process, we kind of looked at this certainly as something more than what's already there. I think that's why we kind of designated mixed residential for that potential for more intensive residential, but did not indicate it would be more like that would be an urban corridor. If you think of it in terms of place types, I think what I hear the applicant talking is really more of an urban corridor type concept or hybrid, industrial hybrid. So I think what I would encourage you planning commission body, which may be another good reason to defer to see how the community comes back and weighs in on the plan recommendations, is really about what should that whole block be about. And so if you approve, just know this, if you approve UGC there, I think it does set the tone for the rest of that block. And so our policy recommendation in the draft is that this will be mixed residential. So I guess to your point, Chairman, if commission thinks that it's appropriate for this to shift to more of a non-residential with some residential, like more like an urban corridor, then I think y'all would need to at least kind of note that as part of your remarks. So it's more of us responding to your direction to develop conditions consistent with your decision. Does that make sense?
Yes. Okay, with that, what's the will of the commission on this case? Where's Barry Payne when I need him?
Do we not have a motion to defer for 30 days?
That has not been put in the form of a motion. You could do that though, Mr. Farmer. It's really...
just for the record, the chair is asking me for a motion for deferral. I think this is quite the occasion. So I'll make a motion.
Just to clarify, I did not ask you to make a motion for deferral. I said, make a motion.
I'll do it, Mr. Farmer, if you don't want to.
I would move that we would defer 30 days.
I will second it because I'd like for Councilman Byrd to have to weigh in on this particular case as well.
Thank you, Commissioner Farmer and Councilman Ledford. We do have a motion to defer for 30 days and it has been properly seconded. Any discussion?
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Maybe.
I guess this is probably best asked to John. Are you looking for comments from us on if we think that there is potential for higher use on that block in terms of how y'all address the area plan?
Yes, I would, and maybe here's some thinking, like a commissioner, maybe as part of the hearing. You'll get that hearing next week, and I mean we can certainly talk about this block as part of that hearing, and that way at least you've got a pending case, and that maybe that's where y'all, because it is as you know, a draft plan with modifications. So one opportunity would be to look at that particular block and see if there's a change or keep it as it is or modify it as part of that hearing.
Thank you.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Okay, Bailey?
Aye.
Ledford?
Yes.
Palmer?
Yes.
Hyatt?
Yes.
Varone?
Yes.
Farmer?
Yes.
Wilson?
Yes.
Lehman?
Yes.
Bankston?
Yes.
Coker? Matthews?
Aye.
Maybe?
Aye.
Parks?
Here.
Payne? Motion carries.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Bridger. Next case on the agenda is case 2020-0055. And this is a special permit for an outdoor shooting range. This case has a staff recommendation to deny, and I understand we have some opposition on the line. Is that right, Karen?
That's correct.
And is the applicant present?
I cannot see. I have a Mr. Ferguson wants to speak. David Ferguson. Brian, and am I correct in that David?
That's correct. He is the applicant.
I do not see David Ferguson on the line. I do see Steve Ferguson, who I know was perhaps speaking. David Ferguson, if you're on the Zoom webinar, if you could, or Zoom meeting, if you could raise your virtual hand. I'm just not able to match you up with one of the names.
Steve Ferguson, I believe, is part of the applicant.
So I see Steve Ferguson. I'm allowing him to talk whenever he's ready, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chair, we do have people in support of this request as well.
Okay, so we have people in opposition, we have people in support, and we have the applicant?
That's correct. And
we have a staff recommendation to deny?
Correct.
Okay, I'm going to turn this meeting over to Todd Lehman. Thank you. Todd, it's all yours.
Todd Lehman.
Okay. You're kidding. He's kidding. He's not kidding. Okay. I thought he was kidding. Okay, well, let's hear, Brian, if you could take us through staff recommendation.
Sure, Mr. Chairman. This is a request for a special permit for outdoor shooting range. Location of this request is at 10335 Highway 58, basically at the corner of Highway 58 and Dolly Pond Road. Here's another view of the site, looking north on Highway 58 and Dolly Pond to the left, and the site is just in the corner of this triangle. This picture here is a view of the entrance to the development from Highway 58. This is a view of the site from Dolly Pond Road. And I just threw on the screen sort of the general location of the shooting area and the 40-foot tall berm that's existing on the property. You can see the view from Dolly Pond Road. This is a view south of the site. This is the entrance to Falcon Crest subdivision. Here's a view north of the site. The site's highlighted in the yellow box, and then you see the north, you have single family, large tract single family developments. This particular piece of property has a zoning designation of A1 agriculture. To the north is A1, to the east is R2A, and to the south is A1, and to the west is A1 zoning. There is no zoning history on this particular piece of property. Just a reminder of what some of the permitted uses are in the A1 zone. You have single family detached, agriculture uses, daycare homes, and you also have a special permit for outdoor shooting range. As part of the shooting range requirements, you have to submit a site plan showing the property lines and location of target facilities, with explanation of their uses within the tract, location of vehicle entrance and exit points, location and size of all parking areas, location of sanitary facilities approved by the health department, and location of the earthen berm, which must be provided as a backstop to aid in control of the firearm discharge. If you see on the right-hand side of the screen, this is the site plan that was submitted with the application. To the right of that site plan is Highway 58, and to the south is Dolly Pond Road. The area I've highlighted in the red circle, that's the wooded embankment. The applicant states that's 40-foot high. And so you can see in the green is the shooting area. They'll be shooting north into that 40-foot embankment. And then further south, highlighted in like the bluish circle, that is a school. They're providing on-site school facility training. As part of there's not much guidance on the outdoor shooting range permit, things in terms of review materials, but it did state that the location of the facility on the property shall not be in proximity to any adjacent existing residential uses, so as to be considered a nuisance in terms of noise or safety. One thing, this permit is revocable by the Hamilton County Mayor, the County Commission, the Health Department, or the Sheriff, and that permit can be revoked when it appears that the use, the method of operation is seriously detrimental to the safety and welfare of the surrounding area. Those are the only requirements in that permit, the things that we have to look at when reviewing a similar request. Also wanted to show you some existing land uses nearby. To the north is single family detached. To the west is single family detached. And of course, to the south is a single family detached subdivision, Falcon Crest. And to the right or the east across Highway 58 is single family detached residential. Also, just wanted to show you some approximate distances from the shooting range to the adjacent residential. You can see to the north, it's about give or take 400 to 450 feet away from the shooting range. The home to the northeast is approximately 350 to 450 feet away from the shooting range. To the west, it's about 375 to 450 feet from the shooting range to that home. And of course, to the south of Falcon Crest, it's about anywhere from 300 to 375 feet to the entrance to the subdivision or to the single family homes that are in Falcon Crest subdivision. There's no floodplain on this property. However, there's a stream that follows to the south of the property that actually does go into a floodway. There is no adopted land use plan for this particular area. It is located in the Hamilton County Comprehensive Plan, which identifies a majority of this site as development intensity level 3. Level 3 areas are typically in close proximity to minor road intersections. Generally, these areas are moderately populated with development patterns that include a wide variety of residential housing and small to medium scale commercial industrial development. So staff recommendation is to deny the request. The request is not compatible with surrounding single family detached residential uses. The nearest dwelling to the proposed shooting range is less than 300 feet away. According to Article 6, Section 407B, location of the facility on the property shall not be in proximity to any adjacent existing residential uses so as to be considered a nuisance due to noise or safety hazard. Then also proximity of the proposed outdoor shooting range to the adjacent residences raises concerns with the potential nuisance of noise produced by a shooting range, as well as safety for the surrounding residents. So staff recommends to deny the request.
Okay, thank you, Brian. Does any planning commissioner have any questions for staff? Okay, hearing none, I guess, Karen, I do want to make a comment. I don't know if anybody's on the line yet, but we do have a 7-minute applicant, 9-minute opposition, and then 2-minute applicant follow-up. So anybody in support will need to be either in the front end 7 minutes or the end 2 minutes, and everybody in opposition will be that 9 minutes. And we will try to watch the time best we can relative to this. So Karen, if you'll take it relative to, I'm assuming you have the applicant.
Mr. Chairman, before Karen goes to that, I did share via email this morning all the comments that staff received. So if the opposition and supporters do not have the opportunity to speak, their comments were shared with the PC members.
Thank you, Brian. I did see that.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, just this might require a little coordination with the applicant just due to the nature of how many people registered to speak. Mr. Ferguson, I did unmute you. You should be able to speak. You provided some additional names to the Regional Planning Agency that you would also like to speak. And I do not see that, and there were 1, 2, 3, 4 other names provided to us, and I don't see those other individuals on the call, so you might have to help me coordinate that.
They'll be here on Zoom. We're in a safe distance.
Okay, so but are they on the call? So I need to promote them to speak, or they will be using your microphone?
They'll be using my microphone.
Right. And just one other note, Mr. Chair, is that we had 3 additional people had let us know they want to speak. One of them, I think, is Mr. Ferguson's already, 2 people Mr. Ferguson's already got with him, and another person contacted us over the weekend, and I do not see him as one of the attendees, but just to note there was somebody else who wanted to speak and support, but I don't think he's on the call.
Yes, I have, actually, there'd be me and 3 others.
Okay, great.
Okay, well, great.
And that should, Mr. Chair, that should take care of everyone who wants to speak and support that we're aware of that signed up in advance, except for the one who doesn't appear to be on the call.
Okay, well, we'll start with the 7 minutes for the applicant.
Yeah, good afternoon.
Go ahead, Mr. Ferguson.
Okay, good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. My name is Steve Ferguson. I am an affiliate and certified instructor with the United States Concealed Carry Association. This course teaches extensive training skills. You get 2 courses in one setting, concealed carry and home defense fundamentals. My mission statement. When I first moved here, I saw there was a need in churches for security teams. Churches have become soft targets. And with my extensive background in security, I would be a great help in training churches how to protect their congregation, better equip their security teams, families, and individuals. Home security. You will get some great ideas on how to better secure your home against a home invasion. And we give some stats. The FBI says break-ins 22% of the time, back door and screen doors. 23% of the time, first floor windows. And 34% of the time will be front doors. If you are encountering a breaking and entering, have a plan in place. Gather your family into a safe room and call 911. Did you know that you are more than 3 times likely to be a victim of a violent crime than to be a victim of a residential fire? The law, the legal aspects of concealed carry and the use of deadly force. First, we did not start this encounter and we could not escape from it. Seconds do count. Deadly force is a reasonably threat against yourself and another person. Great bodily harm, deadly objects, and sexually assault such as attempted rape. Try your best to avoid the threat, escape, and use commands to try to get out of this threat. Only take action if necessary. Would you agree with many that most Americans would agree that the unalienable rights of life and liberty would include the right to be free from murder, rape, robbery, assault, and mass shootings? Firearm basics, a complete guide to firearms and shooting fundamentals. We teach the 4 universal laws of handgun safety. I'll mention 2 because of time. Treat all guns as they are loaded. Never place your finger on a trigger until you're ready to shoot. How to store your firearms safely and keep them out of reach of children. Now the next speaker.
Mr. Chairman, my name is Robert Lynn Crawford, and I'm here on behalf of speaking for this applicant. I've known them, Steve Ferguson, David Ferguson, for quite some time, and know they're a man of their words. My history, I was a senior manager for TVA Central Laboratories in engineering, and our primary customer were nuclear plants. So my focus was on attention to detail and procedure. And in talking with the Fergusons, they've done a great service here in bringing the attention to detail that they're putting into this this training facility. As you know, in Hamilton County, we don't have a location where we could go and train as a team. And that's what they're bringing to Hamilton County that is very much needed. Also, the nearest facility we can go and do outdoor shooting is Prentice Cooper. And that's not really something that's available when the classroom is located here in Harrison. And now the next speaker.
Mr. Chairman, my name is Andy Bell. I head up the safety team at our local church. 2 or 3 years ago, we had an agent from the Tennessee Department of Homeland Security came to our church, and he talked to our pastor and our deacons, and he emphasized the importance of churches having safety teams. Unfortunately, we do live in a day and age where churches and places of worship, synagogues, mosques, temples have become targets of terrorists, people who want to come in and do harm. As the agent talked to our deacon board and our pastor, he explained that a church that does not provide some type of security in today's setting would actually be negligent in protecting the congregants. So at our church, we have established a safety team. We do as much training as we can. We're limited to what we can do there at the church. We quarterly meet. We go over our safety plan. We talk about any issues that have come up in the last quarter. All of our safety team members are concealed carry permit holders as well. They are armed. But I think this school that Mr. Ferguson is trying to get established would increase our safety team's ability to provide the safety needed in church. The classroom setting, one-on-one with an instructor, Mr. Ferguson, then actually going out to the range that to my knowledge is strictly a handgun range, and have our safety team become even more familiar with their firearms. In our country, we're guaranteed the right to keep and bear arms, but I think with that right also comes the responsibility to know how to properly handle a firearm. I would highly recommend Mr. Ferguson's program be approved so that he could teach not only our church, but there are several other churches here in the Harrison community. We are in the Bible Belt, probably the buckle of the Bible Belt, and there are a lot of churches that could utilize the services that Mr. Ferguson offers, not only churches, but also individuals who have concerns for their safety, who would like to learn more about how to handle a gun, how to handle it properly, and safety. So I believe Mr. Ferguson's school that he's proposing would be a benefit to our community. Now our next speaker.
Mr. Chairman, let everybody know we have 54 seconds left.
Mr. Chairman, my name is Bob Scott. I live in this area, and I just want to be on record to say that I support this endeavor. I think it'd be an asset to our community, and especially a great asset to our smaller churches in this area that needs a lot of help with their security. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Scott. It's about time on the applicant. He will have, or you will have about 2 minutes for follow-up. I'd like Karen now, if you could move us into opposition. I'm assuming you have some queued up that are willing or wanting to speak.
I do, Mr. Chair. We have two people that signed up to speak in opposition. Shanna Knight, who I just brought into the meeting with planning commissioners, and I'll unmute her here in a second. And Ricky Clifford, I do not see Ricky Clifford in the attendee list. If you can raise your virtual hand or use the chat box to tell us you're here, we will bring you in. But I'll go ahead and unmute Ms. Knight and allow her to speak. Ms. Knight, you might need to unmute on your end.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you.
Okay. I live on Dolly Pond Road across from Mr. Ferguson. I'm part of Falcon Crest subdivision. They do shoot over there sometimes now. It is very loud. I will say when I am at my home, I want to be able to relax, not listen to that constant noise. I want to not be fearful of bullets. You know, we have kids playing outside in the neighborhood. We have animals that stay upset over it. Approving a shooting range is going to make that unbearable for everyone there. I personally am in the process of becoming a foster parent. These children that are going to be coming into my home they've already been through so much trauma and frightening experiences. I don't want them across from a shooting range. Aside from the personal reasons, property value. You know, as soon as that range is approved, if it were, all of our values are going down. All of the equity that we've worked hard to build are going to go down. You know, I work in real estate. Real estate and the economy are doing very well, but that will not be the case for us. Resales will suffer in that area if this shooting range is approved. I do understand the safety aspect of it, and, you know, some wanting a class and a shooting range that's closer, but across from a subdivision is not where it belongs.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Knight. Karen, did you get Mr. Clifford, or do you see?
I don't see that Ricky Clifford that did not chat or raise actually, let me check, I'm sorry. Raised a hand, but we did have someone that noted that they had registered to speak and they're on the call, and they're not on our list, but I did see we received communication from them. So I can allow Pablo Fernandez to speak, and I'm bringing that person into the call and unmuting Mr. Fernandez.
And I do have a question for Ms. Knight, Chairman, when you have.
Well, let's, if Ms. Knight's still on, Councilman Ledford, go ahead and ask her your question.
Ms. Knight, are you still there?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am. So first of all, a complete advocate for gun safety. So there's no question about firearm safety. That I think that's completely understood. My question for you though is, do you know that if children play in those in that area? I know when I was younger, I kind of canvassed the local woods and you know, without much thought about who really owned it. And as a young child, do you know if kids play in that area at all?
Yes, there is a house directly across the street from me that is near the wooded area, that there are kids out there all the time. I do see kids out there playing, but they also help with mowing, and they go really, you know, into the wooded area. So yes.
Okay, and then I think I understood, this may not be a question for you, but I think I understood, this will be a rhetorical question, that this is a training facility so that people who are not quite so familiar with firearms will be outdoors with firearms. I think that's the way I understood that. That's not a question, Chairman. I just wanted to make sure that I understood the proximity and if children were involved in playing in that area. And I appreciate the question.
Thank you, Councilman. Karen, did you bring Mr. Fernandez in?
Yes, sir. He is on the line and should be able to speak.
Okay, Mr. Fernandez, if you'd like to speak, you have an opportunity, a few minutes left to speak on this case.
Thank you for the opportunity. Hello, everyone. Hope you guys all have a great afternoon. First of all, I think there's no questioning regarding the ability of Mr. Ferguson and the ability of his program to help our community. I think we're not questioning his ability as a trainer, neither his ability to help churches. I just want to bring some data here. There was our community here in the Falcon Crest subdivision have an online group on Facebook. And the matter was brought to the discussion online, and there were around 168 comments about this subject. And I make a personal count here, there were 24 people participating in that discussion on these 168 comments. 3 people were arguing in favor, 20 people were arguing against. So it's a margin of 83% of our community here that manifest themselves online think that this is not a good idea. And in general, it's a problem of location. It's not a problem against Mr. Ferguson and neither against his ability to teach and train people well. It's just a problem of location. This probably is not the right place to put this shooting range. So again, I would like to appreciate and thank you for the opportunity to speak on this matter.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Fernandez. Anybody else, Karen, that
I don't have anyone else. The only other person I still don't see, that Ricky Clifford has not contacted us. So I don't have anyone else registered to speak to this matter, Mr. Chair.
Without objection from any commissioner, I think I'll allow Mr. Ferguson or the applicant the two minutes for rebuttal, and then we can ask some additional questions if need be. Is that appropriate? Anybody else have anything else prior to that?
Yes, this is Dave Ferguson.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead. You got about 2 minutes. I'm
Okay.
assuming you heard the opposition.
Yes, I'm the owner of the property. I'm David Ferguson. I've been living here for 17 and a half years. Falcon Crest was never over there when I bought my property. Of course, that's fine. They're over there. That's great. But we've been shooting here ever since I got here and up against the burn. And it's not that we're not going to, we're going to continue to shoot because it's a county. We've been shooting here, like I said, for 17 and a half years, pistol shooting up against the big back burn that we have behind us here. And we're not that we're not trying to be a nuisance to anybody, but we will continue to shoot because that's why I came here as in the county way before Falcon Crest or any of the houses were here. We were shooting way before that, And of course, hopefully the people understand that. I moved to the county so I could do that. So I appreciate you listening. I appreciate the commission. And my brother Steve wants to say something.
I'm just going to wrap it up and say, we're going to work with the community, not against the community. And that we are going to have time restrictions on when to shoot, not to shoot. And, we'd like people to come by and see the facility as set up. It is set up professionally, and there'll be no waving. They'll be on target, and on target, there's only 5 stalls that they can be in to shoot. So I have control of 5 shooters, and that's it. You're talking about 500 rounds at one setting. That's the end of my comment. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Ferguson.
Yes,
well,
sir.
We've used time both for opposition and for the applicant. Does any commissioner have any questions related to the applicant or staff? Okay. Is any commissioner want to offer, if they don't have any questions or comments, offer a motion?
I will, Todd.
Mr. Farmer.
So I I've built a bunch of houses or a number of houses close by there and about a mile from that site. So I'm very familiar with it. And I've actually have starting a few more houses in the next few weeks, really close there. So I'm very familiar with the site. I would make a motion to deny. I think what the applicant is doing makes a lot of sense. I go to a big church, and safety is a big issue, and it's something we talk about a lot. But I don't think this is the site at all for that. I've sold houses to almost 100% families in that area. I drive a lot. I see the school bus drive through there, and we've had some history of turning. This body has had some history of turning down shooting ranges that are close to residential areas, and it just appears to me that it would just be not the right site and a nuisance.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Farmer. Have a motion from Mr. Farmer to deny. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, have a second from Councilman Ledford. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, we'll do a roll call vote. Ayes are to accept the or to recommend denial. Mr. Bridger, if you'll go through roll call.
Sure. Okay. Give me 1 second. Bailey?
Aye.
Ledford?
Yes.
Palmer?
Yes.
Hyatt?
Yes.
Barone?
Yes.
Farmer?
Aye.
Wilson?
Yes.
Lehman? Okay, your chairs, you can't vote. Bankston?
Yes.
Coker? Matthews?
Aye.
Maybe?
Aye.
Parks?
Aye.
Payne? Okay, motion to deny passes.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Bridger. I do want to mention, I guess, to the applicant, opposition, and other individuals that may be interested or still on the phone, it does go, this is a recommendation to deny to County Commission. It'll go to County Commission probably next month, so be aware of that. I guess moving on our agenda, I'm looking on the website, on the RPA website, Mr. Bridger, so you may help me. Is the next case 2020-0065?
That's correct.
Okay. And that is a rezoning request from M1, M2, R2, C2, and UGC to C3. It does have a staff recommendation to approve with conditions. Do we have any opposition?
Mr. Chair, we do not have anyone sign up to speak in opposition.
Does the applicant, do we have any applicant on the line relative to the conditions, or is anybody?
We have, and pardon me, we have Bryant Black signed up as an applicant, and I do have a Bryant on the phone, and I'm going to allow him to speak, hoping I've got the right person.
Yeah, and if I could, Mr. Bryant, if you could just whether you're comfortable with the conditions, I guess would be the initial question.
Hey, Todd, this is Brian. I think I don't want to speak for the applicant, but I believe he does have some suggested conditions, amendments to the conditions that staff's proposing.
Okay. I tell you what, Brian, why don't you go ahead and go through the case, and then we'll hear from the applicant.
Okay, bear with me. It's a long case. It may take a little while to get through it, but this is a request to rezone from C2, R2, M1, M2, and UGC with conditions to C3 with conditions. Purpose is revitalization of the old manufacturing site and development as mixed use residential and commercial property. The site's about 20 acres in size. The location is along East Main Street. You see East Main Street to the north of the site, Dodds Avenue to the east or to the right, East 19th to the south along South Watkins and South Lyerly Street. It's located 1800, 1809, 1801, 1700, 1620, 1500, 1601, 1603, 1605 South Watkins, 2461 East 18th, and 1506 South Lyerly Street, and 2 unaddressed lots off East 16th and East 17th Street. This is a view of the site looking toward Main Street from Watkins Street. This is the view of the site, again, looking toward Main Street from Watkins Street, the site from the right-hand side. This is a view looking from Main Street towards I-24 in the ridge cut. The site's dead center there in the picture. This is looking south of the site along East 17th Street, looking towards the site. This is looking north towards Main Street along East 18th Street. And then just another overview of the site looking from Main Street towards I-24. You can see this is a very large urban development. It has multiple zones on this property. It has M1, M2, R2, C2, and then to the south, you have UGC with conditions. To the north, there's various zones along the north. You have C2, M1. To the northeast is the M2 and M1. And to the east is R2, C2, and R3 zoning. To the south, there's R1 and R2. And then further south, you have M3. And then to the west, you have a few little spot zones of C2, M1 and M2. And then further west, you have R2 and then R4 and R3. So it's a very diverse mixture of zones in this general location. On this particular site itself, we have had some zoning history. In 2007, the 1500 and 1600 blocks of Watkins Street and the 2500 block of East 16th, we did receive a request to rezone from M1 to R3. RPA recommended approve with conditions. Planning Commission recommended approve with conditions, and ultimately City Council denied the request based on opposition. And then 2014, to the south in this site, which is 1700 and 1800 Watkins Street and 2461 East 18th Street, there was a request to rezone from R2, M1, and M2. That was approved with conditions. Those conditions are restricted to auto-oriented uses are prohibited. And on the site plan back then, it had several buildings, and those buildings were to remain based on the site plan. Just a reminder what the different zones allow. M1 allows a wide range of uses, allows recycling processing centers, blast furnace, boiler works, forge plants, etc., and any other lawful use other than those specified in the M4 zone. M2 allows cabinet, woodworking, lumber yards, contractor's office, wholesaling, warehousing, offices, and food products packaging. R2 allows single family and two family dwellings, boarding houses and lodging houses. The UGC zone allows auto-oriented retail sales and services, residential excluding single family and two family. It also allows motels and hotels, hospitals, banks, and restaurants. The C2 is a wide open, allows pretty much any use, retail sales and services, dwellings, bowling alleys, theaters, hospitals, restaurants, hotels, motels, and adult-oriented establishments. Again, the request is for C3. The C3 permitted uses are any commercial use, government agencies and buildings, offices, dwelling units, multifamily units, and townhouses only. And then in general, any lawful use except as otherwise limited or prohibited. So the C3 allows a wide range of permitted uses. Showing you the site relation to adjacent uses. To the east or to the west, there's a school. You do have single family. You have single family and vacant land. To the south is single family and multifamily. To the east of the site is manufacturing uses, single family and commercial. And to the north is commercial and single family and multifamily uses. There are no environmental features in terms of floodplains or steep slopes on the property. There is a stream that crosses the front of the property along East Main Street. This is in the this is in the Area 3 land use plan, the Historic River to Ridge plan. Again, it's in the final stages of adoption, and it has three place types for this property. One's mixed residential, which based on the intent is a wide range of housing options that feature moderate to high intensity housing options. The second place type is urban residential. It's traditional neighborhood pattern that includes a wide range of housing types, both single family and small to moderate scale apartments, a well-connected grid pattern, and limited small scale businesses may be located in urban residential place types, typically on corner lots. And then finally, the third place type is urban corridor, which allows a mix of housing, services, and entertainment in a pedestrian-friendly environment. The urban corridor contains a broad mix of uses, including multifamily housing, offices, institutional uses, and personal service establishments. And these are typically located on A streets. This, on the right-hand side, is the site plan. Well, it's really more of a conceptual layout that was presented by the applicant. I basically took that site plan and overlaid the place types on the site plan. As you can see, along East Main Street in the bluish color, that place type recommends urban corridor. And then in the middle block is mixed residential. And then these little pink blocks here on the left-hand side are urban residential. So we'll talk about the mixed residential development form and density. Development form of mixed residential, again, which is primarily the big block here in the middle of this development. Development form says basically in Area 3 plan, the lot widths vary in size. They have shallow front setbacks, usually 0 to 15 foot. Buildings are typically between 4 to 5 stories on A streets and 1 to 3 stories in other streets. The density is a max of 15 dwelling units per acre. Primary uses include 2 to 4 unit detached, cottage courts, courtyard apartments, townhouses, and multifamily up to 12 dwelling units per acre. Some of the secondary uses are multifamily dwellings over 12 dwelling units per acre, neighborhood serving businesses, restaurants, offices, and pubs, and single family narrow lot houses. The next place type we'll talk about is the areas highlighted in the pink and the green. That's urban residential. Urban residential development form, lot sizes vary, but typically are not more than 50 foot wide. You have a front setback of 10 to 25 foot. Buildings are spaced at least 10 foot apart, range in height between a story to 2.5 stories, and multi-unit is 3 stories. Primary uses are single family detached, ADUs, 2 to 4 dwelling units per lot, and cottage courts with a max of 8 units per lot. Secondary uses include multifamily and neighborhood retail services. And finally, the third place type is the urban corridor, which is along East Main Street. Buildings front directly on the street with minimal setbacks up to 15 foot. Densities of 20 dwelling units per acre or more, with 12 dwelling units per acre being the minimum. Buildings occupy 80% of primary street frontage with parking to the side and rear. And building heights have a max of 4 stories with some exceptions made for 6 stories. Primary uses are multifamily, entertainment, grocery stores, offices, mixed use, small scale workshops. And some of the secondary uses are multifamily under 20 dwelling units per acre, light industrial, retail shops, and restaurants. This is just a map, if we have to see it, of what the A streets are, which is really East Main Street in this general location. We asked the applicant to provide a typical block concept of what this would look like. We understand this is a 20-acre master plan development that may change over the years. So they did send us a rendering of what a typical block would look like. And this is what that represents. This is the block in the lower left-hand corner of their site plan. This representation shows a rendering of dwelling types within a block or phase of development. The developers utilizing the horizontal property regime and may have densities between 15 dwelling units per acre to as many as 35. And if you look on the site plan to the left, the blue represents single family detached. The lighter white color are townhomes or single family attached. The light blue is multifamily. And then the brown is a stacked duplex. So you can see they have a multitude of or various types of housing options on one block. We also asked the applicant to provide an overview of why C3 and there's other zones that we have, why those other zones would not work for this project. So I'll quickly go through that. Again, the primary goal of this development is to integrate market rate and affordable housing. To achieve this goal, the site must be developed with single family detached, townhouses, and multifamily in a single parcel or block, which is i.e. the horizontal property regime. And to overcome some of the individual exclusions permitted in RTZ and UGC zones, it makes sense in developer standpoint to blend the two zones into one zone, which is the C3 zone. As we remember, UGC prohibits single-family detached dwellings. It also prohibits two-family dwellings. The RTZ zone prohibits multifamily, and it does not permit multiple structures on one lot. Utilizing a single zone with conditions is more effective in accomplishing the development goals of the development plan for the project, and a single zone would or could eliminate or limit the need for variances within this development. They also had some additional requirements about the UGC zone. The UGC zone, if it was used, would require a type C landscape buffer along shared property lines with any residential zone or any property with a single family detached use. If lot lines are introduced into this HPR development, a type C landscape buffer could become an issue for the development. The UGC front setbacks have a 0 minimum up to a max of 15. Traditional front yards is more applicable than intentional public space for residential development. So the UGC setbacks could be a concern. The RTZ front setbacks, units will front exterior streets. The front setback is an average of structures within 300 feet. There are no new structures within this development. So development will introduce a new urban form with rear loading and parking. So front setbacks could be a concern with the development. As I stated before, the RTZ zone does not allow multiple structures on one lot, as the developer wants to utilize the HPR program. Some of the development standards in RTZ is in terms of lot frontages. RTZ has a minimum lot frontage of 25 foot. The applicant may propose a 20-foot lot frontage for some models. Townhome frontage in the RTZ is 16 foot. Proposed development plan may show 14-foot model lot frontages to develop density as required to support an affordable housing requirement. The RTZ zone also has a height restriction of 2.5 stories or 35 feet. The proposal is for 3 stories. And ADUs are not permitted in the RTZ zone or UGC. We're going to talk about the site plan itself. Blocks 1, 4, and 7, which the red arrows lead to, that's currently zoned UGC. Plans are to introduce new single-family detached residential for these general locations. UGC does not allow single-family detached dwellings. Block 1, which is the existing SCT building, proposal is to have a mixture of human services, residential, warehousing, retail, and light industrial uses for this building. Industrial uses are not permitted in the UGC zone. Warehousing is permitted, but it has a maximum square footage size of 5,000 square foot. That's a very large building, which the square footage would exceed that maximum square footage for warehousing. Also, finally, along East Main Street, there's a stream that crosses this property, which requires a 60-foot stream buffer. Because of that, it makes it difficult to comply with the UGC maximum 15-foot setback, and also to incorporate sidewalk and streetscape improvements because of that stream buffer. The site has an existing parking lot that would not be in compliance with the principles of UGC based on that stream. And so the highest and best use of the property may be just the parking lot. So based on all that, this is a request for C3. So what has changed? The C3 was originally developed as a downtown central business district zone. It was the intent of the C3 business zone to promote and sustain the development of a maximum efficient density and diversity of commercial, governmental, and service enterprises to serve the center of the business and cultural interests of Greater Chattanooga. Since 2000s, the C3 zone has been utilized for areas like Jefferson Heights and Cameron Harbor and South Broad for development concepts that feature a mixture of residential housing types on the same block, or a mix of uses that could not be accommodated with other existing zone tools. In 2002, the City Council did adopt a policy that C3 should be constrained to the boundaries of the downtown plan, with Central Avenue being the easternmost boundary of that C3 boundary. Prior to the policy, the C3 boundary was much smaller than it is today. The boundary was expanded in 2002 for the following 3 reasons. The updated and expanded downtown plan called for new urban mixed-use development in the North Shore, South Side, and M.O. King neighborhoods. Builders were submitting development proposals for this area, and because no other zone would accommodate the type of urban development, the boundary was extended to its current extent. Here's a map of that boundary, which was adopted in 2003. Here's Central Avenue to the right. So that boundary stopped, the C3 boundary stopped at Central Avenue. So the C3 is typically bounded by Tennessee River to the west, Chattanooga Creek to the south, Central Avenue to the east, and Fraser Avenue to the north. Because the C3 has few development standards, staff has historically considered C3 zone. The C3 zone as a last resort when no other tools will work for the development concept. Since 2010, there's been 3 C3 requests. 2 of those cases, staff determined that other zone tools, such as UGC, could accommodate the proposed development program. And the other case was approved for C3 for a portion of the site where housing unit configuration was proposed of townhomes and small lot detached residential with 0 setbacks on the same block, which could not be accommodated with another zone tool option. Here's the boundary of the C3 boundary, and you can see where those cases were in 2018 along East Main Street. And Central Avenue, we did have 2 requests to go C3. Staff recommended deny and go UGC, again, based on the proposed housing concepts. The UGC was the zone that would accommodate their development proposal. Then in green, this is on South Broad. Portion of that site was approved for C3, the remainder zoned RTZ and UGC. And then of course, today right here is where the current request is. You can see it's quite some distance away from the C3 boundary. The request is located outside that boundary. While with adoption of the form-based code, which covers a majority of the area in the C3 policy boundary, the only remaining functional use of C3 is a customized urban zone. In this case, a 20+ acre master plan development is proposed for an area currently zoned mostly M1 and M2 with no conditions, and where the applicant has provided both a narrative and illustrative site plans that would demonstrate how the UGC and RTZ zone tool options would not accommodate the development concept. Also important to keep in mind, the Chattanooga zoning regulations have not been updated on a comprehensive scale since the 1960s. They have been amended over the years, but have not kept pace with new development trends and models in the development community. Staff also acknowledges that the lack of urban residential zones and urban mixed-use residential zones in the zoning regulations is a hindrance to development in the urban areas. And then due to the lack of urban residential mixed-use zones, staff and developers over the years have had to use zoning regulations or designations such as UGC, RTZ, and C3 zoning designations. As I stated earlier, each of these 3 zoning designations have challenges and concerns. The UGC does not permit single family and 2-family dwellings. RTZ does not permit multiple structures on one lot. And the C3 zone, in terms of permitted uses and flexibility and dimensional standards, in terms of lot size and setbacks, is the only zoning tool in the current regulations outside of form-based code that provides flexibility for a mixed-use master plan developments. So staff would recommend to approve with conditions, given that most of the site is already zoned M1 and M2, which are high impact zones, and materials supplied by the applicant. C3 zone with conditions would be appropriate. Staff reviewed the proposed conditions provided by the applicant and compared those with the standard C3 conditions that have been used in the other cases. Since the site is very large and covers multiple blocks, some blocks have less potential for impacts on adjacent existing residential than other blocks. Staff's recommended conditions are based on the consideration of the existing zoning, surrounding land uses, and the C3 condition framework, which have been used in the past. And I'll go through the C3 conditions. Number 1, prohibited uses.
Hey, Brian, are these part of the prohibited uses? Are you getting to sort of what the recommendations are, or the conditions are? Because what I'm real curious of is, because you made a really good justification on
right.
C3.
What I can do is go to the applicants. I have the applicants presentation here. They're very similar. I've highlighted in red the differences. It may make more sense to go straight to those. That way we can have it all knocked out at one time.
Yeah, I'm curious where the staff and the applicant don't see eye to eye, because you know, and then the commission can sort of weigh those,
Okay.
especially without opposition. Karen, I'm assuming there's still no opposition relative to this case.
That's correct. We don't have anyone on the call who would like to speak.
Okay. Yeah,
Okay.
if you could take us.
What I'll do, I'll go through these conditions here. They're the same. What's highlighted in red are the differences. So in prohibited areas, again, this is the same site plan that was submitted with the applicant. The C3 standard conditions did not prohibit uses, so this is something new. So the conditions are in areas C3A, which is along East Main Street, C3B, which is to the left, and C3D and C3GA. It prohibits auto-oriented uses, alternative financial institutions, liquor stores, adult-oriented establishments, kennels, or self-storage and mini warehouses. That's an alignment. The only difference is the applicant has added C3G, where we had this all as C3C. So that's the only difference there, is a G has been added and a block has been added to the south. Condition B is another difference. Areas C3E and C3C, as shown on the attached map, restricting residential uses only. This is one place I think the applicant has it. We did have not to exceed 15 dwelling units per acre within each block. All other uses shall be prohibited. The applicant, I think, does have exceptions to the 15 dwelling units per acre. That's why it's struck out. The applicant wishes to remove that maximum dwelling density per acre. And then item C is the same condition. It's talking about the SCT mill site, same restriction on prohibited uses, but it does allow self-storage. Setbacks, again, the area in white is the same. What's in red is what's different. The applicant is requesting that to add to 2A in terms of setbacks, to add where fronting a public right-of-way, multifamily buildings shall be restricted 3 stories in height or greater. And it goes on to talk about setbacks. Item B is a condition that staff recommended. The applicant wishes to remove condition 2B. That condition read to accommodate outdoor pedestrian activities, including a park, plaza, or outdoor dining. A greater setback is permitted if a street edge showing the public and private space is provided in accordance with condition 6A.
Hey, Brian, if I could jump, sorry for that one. I think he just rolled that language up into A, didn't he? It looks like it to me, unless I'm missing something.
Same. No, it looks the same. But it's also taking out condition 6A. So 2C is what's added is the stuff in red. We're fronting a public right-of-way. The applicant wishes for that to be added. Then for new single-family detached duplex, townhome, and multifamily structures less than 3 stories in height, building setbacks shall be consistent with existing setbacks on the same side of the street. Then the applicant added not to exceed 15 foot from the right-of-way. Staff added in instances where there are no existing structures on the same side of the street, the front setback shall be 10 foot, and all buildings must comply with building separation as required by the building and fire codes. The applicant wishes to have that removed.
Brian, I hate to interrupt you real quick, but just as I'm following along here, I don't see a 2C in your recommendation. Am I missing something?
Is it not shown on the screen?
Setbacks?
Is it not shown on the screen now?
No, I'm following in the staff report. In our agenda package.
I don't have it in front of me. I have to look. If somebody else, Emily or Joe, can look for that, but
that's fine. I'm sorry to interrupt.
Okay, you're fine. On number 3 on height requirements, we have again for areas 3A, 3AB, 3AC, 3AF, and G. The minimum height is 18 foot. The max height of 4 stories. Where we do differ with the applicant is the applicant wishes to change that to 3 stories or a max height of 40 feet for all new single family dwellings. Staff had recommended 2.5 stories or 35 feet in height. And that's also down below in item B where it says C3D and E. The applicant wishes to change that from 2.5 stories to 3 stories. and change the height from 35 feet to 40 feet. And that applies to these perimeter areas along Lowry Street and East 18th Street. Access to sites and buildings, there are no changes on that. These are our typical C3 conditions. The applicant and staff agree. In terms of number 5, off-street parking, where we do differ a little bit, where the applicant's proposing is in item 5B, subsection 2, surface parking lots of more than 20 contiguous spaces on C3A, C3G, or C3D, supporting commercial uses on C3A or C3F shall be landscaped with a minimum of 1 class 1 shade tree for every 5 parking spaces. So basically, we're just adding here from the applicant, where could 20 contiguous spaces, you have to comply, provide landscaping trees. 5C, garages for new residential dwellings shall not front primary streets. What the applicant wishes to say, what we originally said was garages for new residential dwellings shall be located behind the primary building. So there is a little difference there. And then D is the same. There's no difference between the applicant and staff. And finally, number 6, all the conditions on this page are the same. 6A2, there was some clarification on this condition. Highway style guardrails or security fencing shall not be permitted. The applicant wishes to clarify that states that except for the existing highway style guardrail in the main street right of way adjacent to C3A. So that clarifies that existing guardrail would be permitted. And then finally, the last area of discrepancy is in C, really just adding some additional language. For staff said 80% of the ground level building facade facing primary streets shall be designed as leasable space and shall not including parking lots. The developer wishes to clarify this is for new non-residential buildings. So staff, so there's some little differences in the conditions. That's primarily the quickest way I can go through them of the differences.
Hey, Brian, let me ask you a question. Does anything that, because I'm assuming you took the staff recommendations and then all the red is information relative to the applicant. I mean, does anything that they've either added or clarified? I think building height was the only thing that I even saw. Does any of that change the material?
It does not, except the density requirements. That I think, I don't want to speak on behalf of the applicant. I think that's the biggest probably discussion point, you know, is we had, and maybe John can speak to this better than I can, we tried to limit the density in some of these blocks, which is these outer areas here. We try to restrict that to 15 dwelling units per acre per block. The applicant, I think, does have issues with that.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions for staff? And then if Karen can get the applicant on.
I do, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, Councilman.
So Brian, this may have been already asked by the chairman, but so this is a reverse question the way we normally do this. Do you have any major issues with the alternate version, so to speak, outside of the density? I think that's where seems like where we're landing conversation wise.
I don't think so. I think the density is the sticking point between staff perhaps and the proposed applicant. Everything else seems like minor tweaks.
Yeah. So let me ask, can you dive just a little bit deeper into what the opposition from staff is on density? Because if I have done any homework on this in the past, we've allowed or staff's made recommendation for higher density.
Right. I'll let John Bridger. John Bridger would be a good person to answer that. He has a.
He would be, wouldn't he?
He would be.
Yeah,
hey, John, let me interrupt you a second.
Yes,
I'm assuming that you're third in charge. I'm running up against another meeting here in a minute. Are you available? You want me to? I'll try to sit this one out. I mean,
yeah,
sit this one through.
I'd be happy to facilitate if you run out of time. So just real quick, I mean, we had a lot of conversation about whether to use units per lot, because if you note in the Area 3 plan, we typically, the only time we mention density is in actually a floor. And actually, I think Brian in his remarks on the mixed residential place type, it says 15 dwelling units per acre or greater. Typically, in urban locations, density is really not a good measure of compatibility, because depending on how you configure your lots or your houses on a lot, what on paper looks like high density actually is not in terms of what you see on the ground. And so we did have a lot of conversations back and forth how to, because it is in the neighborhood. And so I think if you're trying to transition where you've got some lower scale residential to the west, what is an appropriate limit? I would say maybe the density is not the right word, but thinking about transition intensity of development from one street to the next, what is appropriate? I think where we landed at was this units per acre. So that's kind of what we use as a baseline. I will say that in the mixed residential, it basically talks about when it mentions density, it says 15 units per acre or higher. So I think, well, I guess where I look at it is that was just our attempt to kind of come up with some kind of limit on overall intensity with the adjacent residential. I think you also got to take into consideration that you do have an existing M1 property that's vacant that has no conditions on it. So I'll leave it at that.
Thanks for clearing that up.
Hey, John, you're it. John, can you chair?
Yeah, I will.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
See you, Todd.
Thank you.
Okay. So any more questions of staff before we hear from the applicant?
John, I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Oh, okay. I'm not seeing, okay, I see the density. I guess that's under the prohibited uses under B, 1B, but where does that come back over on the new conditions or the proposed conditions on the?
From the applicant?
Yes, from the applicant.
Yeah.
He's proposing that will be deleted. That's why Brian's showing that as a red line strikeout.
So I'm still confused. Is there a cap?
I think this is probably where the applicant could speak to this, but my understanding is they would say that because it's being limited to residential and that you're limiting the height to no more than, I think it's 3 stories, Brian, is that right?
Yes.
That would in effect serve as a way of limiting the intensity of development on that site based on what's surrounding it.
I see. Okay, thank you.
You might want to, is anybody want to hear from the applicant or unless any other questions from the staff? Okay, hearing no questions of staff. Karen, have you got the applicant ready?
Yes, Mr. Black, you are unmuted and should be able to speak.
Karen,
Yes.
really appreciate the work that the staff has done on this project. It's a large project, it is complicated. And I'll speak to the density question. We really are working to create a mixed use and on top of that, an integrated urban residential form. And the drawing that we provided, the site plan for C3E, is intended just to be representative of the kind of integration that we're really trying to develop so that we have affordable workforce, missing middle housing, all integrated into a single block, you might say. And so that's where the density at 15 becomes an issue. A good example would be our project at 100 at South Broad. Those are all single family units, a combination of townhomes and single family detached. We have a density of 16.5 units per acre. If we were to convert a townhome to a 3-family unit, for example, if we were to take 3 of the single family detached and to develop the model that you saw where we're working on a stacked double family unit, we would drive that density up a little bit higher as well. We're working with C&E as well on the affordable housing. They've done some great work over on Bailey and Union Streets. And their density in their multiplex project on Union Street's at 45 per acre. Now that also represents a large group of multiplex units. We're working to integrate units, not to create one block with 5 multiplex units. But that's why you see this issue of density for us when we look at really trying to create a new form, urban residential form, that's really focused on the integration of affordable mixed income housing. I also would like to draw attention to a couple of attachments. I really appreciate Brian's work, the illustrations that he's provided. I have another attachment, it's attachment B, in the handout that I provided to the Planning Commission, simply to address the surrounding residential commercial mix. If you look at attachment B, you'll see that there are yellow, red, blue, and green dots. To the north, you'll see yellow surrounded by commercial. That's C3C. To the east, there is a small mix of residential and commercial. Interestingly enough, along 18th Street there at Dodds Avenue, while it's zoned R2, it's actually, all of those lots are a part of the daycare center facility. Just to move down to C3E, which is adjacent to Standard Coosa Thatcher. We're talking about density in the surrounding neighborhood. Across Lyerly Street to the west, you'll notice a row of red dots and there's one blue dot. 8 of those 9 houses are empty and they're also boarded up. They're not just vacant, they're not on the market. And you can see that along 19th Street as well. If you were to continue down Lyerly Street between 19th and 21st Street, you would find 3 dwellings, 2 of which are boarded up. 1 is occupied in those 2 city blocks. All the remaining land is vacant. So we do see some occupied residential density on 17th Street and 18th Street that will be buffered. You'll see in green where we have the property there under control, one of which, they're the corner of 18th and South Watkins, is the industrial refuse service. It's a construction dumpster company. And so even in that respect, that will be moving back to residential, which we think would be a real benefit to the community. Other questions? That really is our justification on density, how we're viewing density. We do see, appreciated John's comment that there are natural limits with our height requirements and the separation requirements on our single family detached unit for the building code.
John,
Planning Commission. Okay, go ahead, Councilman.
Mr. Black, so am I hearing correctly in your statement, you believe that the density will actually be limited by the residential use anyways, so it's kind of a not needed? That's correct.
That's correct. All of our single family units are a multifamily. You know, we have a 4-story limit on non-residential buildings. The vast majority of this will be residential. We've asked, just to put in perspective, C3G and C3D, we planned for that to be residential. I moved C3G out of C3C because when this was zoned in 2014 with C3F, which is the Standard Coosa Thatcher building, C3G was intended to be parking for that building so that building could be fully utilized. We think we've got the parking, we've got a plan in place that would allow us to develop residential in C3G. We don't know that that's going to work, and parking will become critical if we're going to fully activate Standard Coosa Thatcher. That building is between 270 and 300,000 square feet, depending on how we look at a couple of smaller pieces within the building that we may have to demo. So it's a really sizable footprint that we have to work with.
That makes sense. Also, on a side note, I can tell you that I know Councilwoman Coonrod is very excited to see such a development come to District 9, which is something I know she's advocated for, and strong support of housing opportunities and economic opportunities commercial wise. So this is bold. This is kind of reminds me of the conversation we were having, I guess, about the Bend not too long ago, where we have the tools that are kind of lacking but the vision is there and the desire. So given that we are in an uncertain economic climate with COVID and not knowing what we're going to be dealt with, I think this is a really good work effort between Planning Commission and you all in particular, because it's encouraging. That's where I'm going with this, Mr. Black. It's encouraging that you're moving forward with such a bold vision for District 9 and our city in general. I do think that the residential component of this will probably take care of the density issue as well, just given the situation that will probably be dealt with. But I appreciate you answering my question, and that's all I have for right now, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Mr. Matthews.
Yeah, I have one question. I guess this is to staff on the conditions that they originally requested. It says prohibited uses on number 1.
Yes.
And on the proposed condition says restricted uses. Is that just a moot point?
Probably good typo. We should be prohibited. Is that right, Brian?
It is prohibited.
Okay. All right. Well, I appreciate that. And Mr. Chairman, if it's appropriate, I would like to move that we approve this based on the proposed conditions for the C3.
And just to be clear,
John,
yeah, no, are you really in terms of the applicant's modifications to the staff proposed conditions?
That is correct.
Okay, so I have a motion from Mr. Matthews, a second by Councilman Ledford. Any discussion from planning commissioners before we have a roll call vote?
John, I'd just like to make one comment.
Sure.
I'm sorry too, I guess, because generally I agree with this is impressive, and I think Brian did a super job. I'm excited about this development. My comment is really at a planning level. I just want to make sure that the applicant knows that in very, very, very early form, there's no planning and not really even any pen to paper. So it's an opportunity for this development. There is a abandoned right-of-way that travels north-south from about 23rd Street to about East Main Street. It goes further south all the way to East Lake, and it goes up towards Anderson Avenue and then bends to the west. I'd like for the developer to get in touch with us as soon as possible so that we can make sure they know where that is. If it ever were to become some sort of a trail, it would be tremendously valuable in my view to this development. And we'd want to make sure that we at least didn't do anything that boxed us into a corner where we couldn't do that. So my comment is for the developer, please to reach out to CDOT as soon as it can so we can start talking about that possibility.
Got it. Okay. Any other comments from planning commissioners? We have a motion and second on the floor.
Yeah. Hey, John.
Yes.
I'd like to commend Collier Construction for taking on this project, and it's been talked about for 30 years, somebody doing something with that site, and I'm glad to see them take that on.
Gotcha. Thank you. All right. Any other comments before we go to a vote? All right. We'll go to our roll call vote. I do have one comment at the end of this, but we'll get to the roll call vote first. Blythe Bailey?
Yes.
Ledford?
Yes.
Palmer?
Yes.
Hyatt? Okay. Is she meant? Okay. Verone?
Yes.
Farmer?
Yes.
Wilson? Lehman? He's out. That's right. Bankston?
Yes.
Coker?
Yes.
Matthews?
Yes.
Maybe?
Yes.
Parks?
Yes.
And is Payne still hanging around? No, he's
Hey,
not.
John,
Yes.
this is Mary Kay.
Yes, ma'am.
I was muted. I kept saying yes. But
Oh, okay. Mary Kay, duly
sorry.
noted. Okay, so
Thank you.
motion carries. All right. Well, that concludes all of our agenda. I will say on that case, just so you know, we normally don't have that many conditions on a case. But in the case of C3, in a lot of ways, where it's I would call it a customized zone for a site. And as Brian noted in his remarks, because there really are limited standards, we almost have to create the standards for each project. And so I do want to appreciate, I think, everybody kind of communicating and working through that particular request. I think it does highlight as we move forward, looking into the Area 3 plan adoption next week and looking at our zoning tools. We are in dire need of better zoning tools. And so we look forward to partnering with Planning Commission and City Council and putting some at first installment of tools forward so that we don't have to do something like this in the case of a case with 30 some odd conditions. So appreciate everybody's hard work. I also want to commend Karen Rennick, who's on for her tremendous job, and Brian and Joe and Emily for all their hard work and putting this together. There's a lot behind the scenes I want you all to know that kept us online. In fact, I just want to brag on Karen. She has actually become sort of the state expert on virtual PC meetings. Now she's shaking her head.
Here, here.
But she has really
job, Karen.
done a great job, and
you.
I'm so thankful that she was there to help us pull this thing through. Any other questions or comments before we adjourn?
Yes, I'm appreciative of that, John, but you still have 2 agenda items, the public comments on non-agenda items and
Yes,
approval
ma'am.
of minutes.
See, always keeping me on task. That's the other thing. All
And
right,
I
so-
will note, Mr. Chair, that we do not have anyone in the meeting that asked to speak on non-agenda items.
Okay, good. So we'll move through that, and then we'll
Need a
just go.
motion to approve the minutes?
As a motion, there's a second.
Second.
All right, motion and a second. Do roll call vote again. Feel like I'm calling a football team here.
John,
Really?
Mr. Chairman, is
Yes,
that for
sir.
both the March 9th and special called meeting, the motion on both those?
I could make that motion carry both if you'd like.
Yes, that'd be fine.
Thank you, sir.
My
All
intent.
right. Okay, Bailey,
Yes.
Ledford,
Yes.
Palmer,
Yes.
Hyatt,
Yes.
Barone,
Yes.
Farmer,
Yes.
Wilson,
Yes.
Lehman, Bankston,
Yes.
Coker,
Yes.
Matthews,
Yes.
maybe,
Yes.
Parks.
Yes.
Okay. I don't think we need to do a roll call vote to adjourn.
Need a motion, though.
Move to adjourn.
Okay, there's a second. All right.
All in favor?
I wonder if I was the reason I got cut off, my video cut off.
I don't know.
My video cut off. Is the host cut me?
Okay. Well, we
Good
are
job,
adjourned,
everyone.
y'all. Y'all
Thank
have
you,
a good
everybody.
week.